And we're live. And I can confirm that we are live, and I will now call the meeting to order. And I can confirm that everyone is present, including Councillor Alcock, who is present virtually. And Councillor Withey, I wonder if you would read the land acknowledgement statement for us this morning.
Well, you no longer have to wonder, because I will. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, I always get that, Anishinaabe, under the terms of the Robinson-Huron Treaty, number 61 of 1850, and the Williams Treaties of 1923. We commit to acknowledge, learn, educate, create opportunity, honor sacred places, and take actions towards real truth and reconciliation in support of our commitment to walking the path together in respect, peace, and harmony for future generations.
Thank you. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Stone and seconded by Councillor Withey. It is recommended that the General Committee meeting agenda dated Wednesday, July 27th, 2022 be adopted as printed and circulated. All in favor? That carries. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we will move right into invited and ceremonial presentations, and we have with us a presentation from TWG Communications on our community branding update. And I will welcome William Ferguson, Dave Wolf, Theo Maragaitis, and Cameron Wilcox. And I'm not sure who's coming up, but whoever's here, please join us at the front table.
So William Ferguson here. And Cameron Wilcox.
Welcome, gentlemen.
And David is with us today, and Theo is actually not with us today, so, but he's joining us in spirit, if not in body. So thank you very much for having us here this morning, Mayor and members of council. We're very pleased to be able to come and give an update on what we've been doing with the Community Branding Working Group and to show you the work that we've accomplished together over the past few months. TWG Communications has been tasked with the development of a new visual identity for the town of Huntsville, a new community brand designed to enhance and unify the public expression of the spirit of the community while coexisting with the current municipal branding. The current municipal logo, which has served the community well, is featured on municipal welcome signage, as well as correspondence, social media, online print materials, and more, as you know. TWG was asked to design a new visual identity that would be used as an enhancement to existing branding and employed for use with town wayfinding, tourism, economic development, and citizen and investment attraction and retention. This new visual identity would be complementary to the existing branding, but also dynamic and distinct from it at the same time. The project called for extensive consultation with the community and stakeholder groups. In order to reach as many individuals as possible, 2 surveys were designed and put into the marketplace. One for stakeholder groups consisting of the BIA, HMATA, the Chamber of Commerce, and Town Council, and a second survey that was designed for application with the broader community. Both surveys were carefully constructed to elicit from respondents their perceptions about Huntsville, how they view the community, what town qualities are of value and importance to them, the importance of being associated with either District of Muskoka or Algonquin Park or both, preferences regarding color, and thoughts regarding select grouping of other municipal brands, including those of neighboring communities like Bracebridge and Gravenhurst. Responses to the community survey was impressive, with more than 300 people taking the time to complete it. And that's a really good uptake for this sort of exercise. Stakeholder response rates were also very encouraging. Both surveys were in market for more than enough time to ensure those invited had ample time to participate. Feedback and input from both surveys sets was instructive. Some indicated confusion regarding the reason behind the exercise, notwithstanding the fact there was an intro video created to explain that up front, which clearly articulated the purpose of the project. Based on direction for the project working group and community engagement process, TWG developed several concepts that were found in-house to most closely meet the project brief. And those selected were shared with the site authority and the working group. Additional refinements were requested. The second round of designs were shared with the working group, consisting of staff, representation from EIA, Chamber, and one particular option was favored, with additional refinements being made. It was clear that the brand must convey a sense of place for the town of Huntsville, both past and present, while also presenting a bold, vibrant, contemporary look and feel that communicates Huntsville as a progressive, forward-looking, diverse, inclusive, warm, and welcoming community. Use of color and texture certainly play a role. The natural elements of the area too would need to be visible: water, forest, the seasons. A subtle recognition of the prominence the District of Muskoka plays as part of Huntsville's identity, and perhaps a nod to Algonquin Park and its internationally iconic status. We heard through community engagement that history and culture were important, and stakeholders said they wanted this to be authentic, progressive, modern, clean, simple, and vibrant, something to enhance the community and tell its unique story. The final brand speaks to all of the above. Bold color choices that convey the natural beauty of the local environment, with a palette inspired by Tom Thompson's In the Northland and Lauren Harris's Montreal River. The use of multiple vibrant colors speak to diversity and inclusion and culture. The four-season nature of the region are playful, warm, and welcoming. We took the community input and stakeholder feedback to heart, and in the finished brand, you will see the dimension of place. The brand provides a delineation of the blues of water below the yellows, greens, reds, oranges, and rusts of the ever-changing landscape. The colors chosen represent the natural beauty of the landscape. The diamond background treatment with the font adds for depth and texture and offers a sense of movement and progression. The diamond grid is inspired by the details of Huntsville's iconic swing bridge with its prominent diamond railings and truss. The brand speaks to history, a deep connection to the natural environment, a sense of pride in having been influential in the creation of Muskoka, historically, culturally, and naturally, Huntsville. And I present to you the finished brand. Wanna go one more? And a variety of uses of the said brand, so both in monochromatic, set on solid color blocks, and on a reverse. We also have some examples of the actual application of the brand, which I will just pass around the table, and you can have a look. These are not finished by any stretch, but they just show how it could be used in a couple of instances. Gives you a sense of how it works. In developing the word mark, we started with a common typeface and then styled it tremendously, so no one else has this font. It is a custom and unique font just for Huntsville, unique to you. And then we also have a couple of items to share with you. Dave, if you want to, and Cam, if you want to bring those items down. Just said to,
Is that the end of your presentation?
that's it.
gentlemen?
We're
Okay.
welcome to take any questions you may have.
All right, we will open it up to questions, and thank you very much for the goodie bags. And I see Councillor Thompson's modeling, part of his right now. Thank you, Councillor. Okay, I will open it up to questions. Councillor Withy.
Thank you, Your Worship. where to start. I was wondering why there wasn't more than just the word. I mean, we've got all these visuals of trees and the environment and things like that. And, you know, when you look at other communities that have the branding, perhaps with the exception of Lake of Bays, you see something sort of iconic in those communities as part of their logo. I was never a fan of the previous one because it was really just a logo of a road sign, but, and this is an improvement for sure. I'm just wondering why there wasn't more of a graphic perhaps with this, or something out of our community that is, as I said, iconic, or like the clock tower or something along with this. Is there an
Yeah,
explanation?
no, I think that's a good question, and the answer quite directly is that we wanted to avoid that if we could, because I think that is the hallmark of all of the neighboring communities' brands. It's a bridge, it's a clock tower, it's a rock, it's a tree, and if we went right up through the north and down to the south, you'll see that everywhere. To be distinct, you need to take a different tack. But what we wanted to do at the same time was make sure that we didn't lose the sense of place, and so that's why the fill inside of the colorized version of the logo is actually taken from the grid of the bridge. So the bridge actually exists here, but it's more subtle than actually having the logo marked on the side of the bridge, for example. So it's taking a different tact. I think it's cleaner, it's contemporary, and it's a little more sophisticated approach to that. So that was deliberate in terms of the project. And it really came clear from the feedback, both from stakeholders and from the working group, that that's sort of the direction they wanted to go in.
Councillor Wiebe.
Thank you, Worship. I commend your efforts on this. I think this is, as you say, I think it is modern, and I really like it. At first, I have to admit, my first glance at it, I found the graphic with the colors a little bit not quite distinct enough that you could get lost. But after seeing it displayed on backgrounds with other material, I think it's actually, I think it's really great. And just remind me again, you said that font is original?
It is, yes. So we started with an existing font, but then we've stylized it tremendously. So the shapes, the ligatures here, it's all customized for you. It's not a font that someone can reproduce and use for a different logo. This is custom to you. Yeah.
Thumbs up.
Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say, I also think big thumbs up from my perspective. I think it really achieves what you tried to set out to do. I sat in one of the working group sessions and remember distinctly thinking, I don't know how you're going to do this, because everybody came at it. We had certain words in common, such as progressive and inclusivity and those things. But you know, when we had disagreements about whether there should be a loon or a tree or this or that, you know, speaking of the iconic features, and I really wondered how you were going to bridge all of the comments and pull out what we had in common. And when I first saw this, I thought you did a fantastic job. It spoke to all of the things, as you said in your presentation. So at first glance, a bit like Councillor Wiebe, when I first saw it, I thought, oh, there was a myriad of color and that sort of thing. But it's really soft and speaks volumes. I really like it. Thank you.
Councillor Stone.
Sorry. Like some others, when I first saw it, I did have to sit with it for a little while, see about different applications. And, you know, there were questions about the conjoining of the U and the N. But then after I sat with it for a while, thought about the different applications and all the different colors, both the black and the relief white and that kind of stuff, I started to really, really like it. I did pass it around to some friends and ask for some input. Most of it was positive. There was some comments that it wasn't classic or cottage country enough. Looks like it was made for Ontario Place, was one of the comments. I think for something like this, in my opinion, this is the kind of thing that we really need 80% of the public to get behind. And it's not necessarily a decision for the 9 of us. I really want to hear from the public about this particular piece before we make a final decision on it. And I know because of the cycles, we will have this month to hear back before it's ratified at council. My question to you is, with the wayfinding usage of this, what kind of background colors are you considering us using for the signs themselves, or the style of the signs is that will have the logo, but also, you know, this way to Macaulay Robertson or something to that effect?
Right, so I think, I mean, we, the boards that we circulated around to give a sense of how it might be used in different iterations are really sort of part of the next phase of the exercise, which is figuring out the application to a variety of products and materials and executions. Wayfinding being one that I understand is going to be a separate project on its own. But I would say within the range of options we provided, from the original sort of full color to grayscale through to the block color usage, there are a lot of options to consider for wayfinding. I mean, I think clarity is going to be a big part of that. It will depend in part on how large the sign is that you're talking about. So the larger the sign, the more logical it is to use the full color version of it. The smaller it is for visibility and readability, one of the monochromatic versions or solid color block versions probably would make more sense. But that's why we've kept that in mind in terms of the design. And that's why the typography has to be really strong. It can't just be, well, we took a typeface that you can take off the shelf, because if you remove everything else, well, what have you got? You just got word typed out. This is unique, right? So the word mark is really the thing in the instance here. So I think we did tease out some options with the committee about what that might look like, but I think there are lots of ways it could be applied to that, and it will work. The key thing is, at the end of the day, the brand has a uniqueness. It has the representation in terms of color and sense of place. Now the question is what you do with it. You know, we want to see a little more cottage country, but let's lay it over some photography that shows cottage country. We want to see a little more attract investment into the community, then let's put it over some business imagery, that kind of thing. So there's sort of two different lines going on, but the brand should have life that goes on for a long time beyond images becoming outdated. You know what I mean? So
Just as a follow-up, so will your group be with us for the rollout or the ideas for our wayfinding signage?
That's not a question I can answer, but I think you have a report coming later in the meeting, so
right.
I'll leave that to those folks.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, and thank you for the presentation. First of all, I thought the multicolored sign was a little bit busy, but I see the application and I like it. And I really like the font. I didn't realize that it was unique to Huntsville. So my question, it must have been really difficult coming up with the hundreds of thousands of fonts out there. It must have been really hard to come up with something unique for Huntsville. So was that the use of artificial intelligence, or did you guys just use your own intelligence?
No, it's just our art directors with years of experience working on it. And in terms of our process in developing brands, generally speaking, we actually develop quite a few iterations in-house before we ever bring anything forward to the client, and sort of narrow down a field, and then come, with 3 or 4 options, and then continue to whittle it down until we get to the ultimate execution. But no, it's just somebody with a lot of years' experience and a master's in fine arts. So, yeah.
Good work, thanks.
Councillor Schumacher.
Through you, Your Worship. So yes, brand new font. I do like it, but of course I'm going to ask. AODA compliant. I know Arial is the go-to for accessibility. And then I guess some questions around when you look at it from an accessibility piece, color blindness and the blue-greens and that kind of thing. So did you take a lot of that into consideration?
Yes, and just in terms of applying the standard to the logo itself, there is more leeway with the actual brand. is not so rigorous. But notwithstanding that, as you can see in the kind of applications we've shown you, we've shown ways to make it very legible in different backgrounds and for different uses. And the other thing is, and it wasn't, I would say this is by design, but it's not really true, it's just the way it came out in the end, is that the style of it, it's almost, with the ligatures, it has a very readable style in its present form. And so we've taken it, we've had iterations where we separated out the L's, for example, from the I. It's actually, this is the most readable variant of it by far. So I think we're good in that sense. In terms of any material you create around it, if you're doing a report or whatever, of course, the rest of the report must conform and the electronic documents must conform. But you've got some discretion around your brand visuals. But I think in looking forward, where the standards may be in 10 and 20 years, you've got a brand here that will be quite workable into the future.
And when you say readable, does that mean like a text-to-talk version where somebody's having that read to them, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, with text-to-talk, normally what you would do with a brand is you would use an alt tag that would actually be what gets read by the screen reader. That's the best way to do it, because brands very often confound AI when they try to read them, although this one might not, but typically you would use an alt tag, so.
Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Dion, for answering that question. That's one I was going to ask. But just through you, Worship, I think it's unique, and I'm looking forward to the large T-shirt black, please.
All right.
Okay, just a quick question, I guess, sort of along the lines of Councillor Stone's. We've been sort of delaying our wayfinding signage program in order to tie it into this. And because this is just a word, and I don't mind, I can't actually visualize that we would put the word Huntsville on all of our wayfinding signage. So in your opinion, is this not actually going to be tied into our signage program?
Well, I think it would be tied into your signage program, and I think there are different ways you could do it. One example we'd used in an earlier round of looking at this brand with the working group, we worked with the diamond fill inside the color version of the logo and pulled some of those diamonds out to create a kind of background for the wayfinding signage. So I think it would be tied in. But I think the other thing is, it's also, because it's a word mark, it's also part of a branding system. That's the way to think of it going forward. So when you think about wayfinding, well, wayfinding sign could just be, this way, to the ski hill and that way to the marina and that sort of thing. And it could be, a blue field and white lettering, or it can be telling the brand story at the same time. And so that would be the reason for having the name Huntsville and having, but in specific, the word mark integrated with it. But it can go beyond that, because wayfinding could also take shapes from the actual brand itself and then turn that as part of the signage system. And so you might use the diamond shapes as your arrows that point in a direction, or you might use it as part of the stand or the structure for the sign, depending on what your application is. Because it could be as simple as a sign that goes on a standard corner post, or it could be an actual, pedestal or plinth style sign that's at the side of the road that's meant to be dimensional in shape. Like, wayfinding means different people to different folks. So sometimes the signs are very elaborate and sometimes they're very simple. But I think you've got in the building blocks of this brand, lots of pieces you can work with for that to incorporate that branding.
And I know that we have a staff report and we have recommendations, and it's ultimately our decision when we approve this and if we approve it. But based on previous experience, would your suggestion as consultants be to now go out to the community with the final product and get some feedback?
In my experience, I wouldn't recommend that at this point, because you've done the consultation in advance. So at the end of the day, the work that's been concluded here is the result of the consultation that's already taken place. But of course, it's entirely your decision on whether you want to do that. At the end of the day, one thing about art, commercial or private, it's subjective, right? Some people will like it, some people will not like it, some people will be very vocal in favor and vocal against. That is typically the way with these things. The question is, does it meet the brief? Are the majority of folks who have to actually work with it day to day pleased with it? Do they think it's a platform they can build on and move out with? Then that's the direction I would take. But again, at the end of the day, you can figure out what the right approach is for you. But I would suspect if you do that, you'll find a mix of opinion. There'll be people who like it, people who don't like it, and I'm not sure that it will bring you any further down the path, but.
Okay. Thank you for your candor. Okay, I think that's it, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the gifts. And we will be discussing this later on in our.
Great,
in
well,
our
thank you for
meeting.
having us.
Thanks for coming up.
Thank you very much.
And with that, we are going into the corporate services part of our agenda, and I will turn the chair over to Councillor Withy.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just give us a little time for this. The pack up.
Thank you for your time.
All right, we're into corporate services and into new business. 6.1.1, we have our report of the 2021 financial results. There is a motion that I will read. It is moved by Councillor Armour, seconded by Councillor Stone. It is recommended the committee approve the 2021 Q4 budget deviations as outlined in Appendix B of Report Corp-2022-63, and further, the committee approve a one-time 2022 transfer of $1.7 million from the Working Funds Reserve to the Fleet Capital Reserve. And we have Riva.
Thank you, Chair Withy. So I'm just going to get right into it. So overall, the town of Huntsville ended 2021 with a surplus of just under 1.6 million. So this surplus is actually the difference between the budgeted net levy and the actual net levy. There really wasn't one specific division that this came from. The majority of divisions had fairly large surpluses due to a number of factors, but most notably was the continuation of the pandemic. And that really resulted in a lot of facility and program closures, temporary layoffs of staff, that kind of thing. So even though there was substantial revenue loss from those program and facility closures, the town was able to control costs to offset those lost revenues. So some of the more significant things that happened throughout the year to contribute to this surplus, so obviously, as I mentioned, there were some significant revenue reductions because of program and facility closures. So that amounted to about $390,000. These revenue reductions, though, were offset by savings in costs. So most notably, there was a savings of about $730,000 in our SWB, so salaries, wages, and benefits. Again, largely because of layoffs due to the pandemic continuation. However, there were several vacancies throughout the year, largely due to retirements and staff turnover. There was also, I wanted to mention, a lack of available part-time staff throughout the year. So it was difficult to fill some part-time positions, and that resulted in some savings. Also, as a result of the facility closures, there were utility savings in the year. So those amounted to about $200,000 just by having facilities closed, and that's just the utilities. Another factor was the assessment center. So the net funding from that of about $290,000 contributed to the surplus. So this funding was used to offset both direct and indirect costs associated with running the assessment center for much longer than we anticipated. So in the budget, we were expecting the assessment center to be open from January to March, and obviously was open for the entire year. There's also the net effect of some other property tax items. So things like the PIL levy, tax write-offs, supplementary taxes. So those amounted to almost $250,000 over the budget. So in our 2022 budget, we did take those increased supplementary taxes into consideration, and we have increased the revenue anticipated in 22 for that. So on page 6 of the financial report, we see the 5-year operating expenses, and the next page shows the 5-year operating revenues. So there are a few things in there that I'd like to point out. Although the operating expenses have increased in 2021 from 2020, they're still not back up to the pre-pandemic cost levels. So in fact, they're almost $1 million less than pre-pandemic levels. So again, this is largely due to the program and facility closures that extended into 2021. It's also compounded by the fact that costs have increased due to supply issues and inflation over the last 2 years. So revenues and program facilities were impacted in 2021, although because of additional grant revenue that we received in 2021, the overall revenues are actually very close to pre-pandemic levels. So this uneven increase in revenues versus the savings and costs is ultimately what led to the surplus. So I do want to note here that the tables and charts that are provided in this section of the report do not include reserve transfers or long-term debt repayments. So throughout the next several pages, the operating revenues and expenses are broken down by division. Again, these pages don't include reserve transfers or long-term debt. Each of the divisional breakdowns also includes the 5-year operating expenses and 5-year operating revenues. I'm not going to go into detail of the divisional summaries unless there are specific questions on those. So moving on to capital, actual capital expenditures were about $1.7 million less than budgeted, and this was largely due to the following items. So a number of 2021 budgeted projects did not occur, largely because of spending or supplier restrictions because of COVID. These projects amounted to about $425,000. Most of these projects have been deferred to 2022 or a future year. The other project that was deferred was the MHP locomotive. And this project, as we've said in our budget discussions, this is really contingent upon receiving grant funding for that. There was no grant funding received in the year, so it was deferred to a future year. There were also several projects completed during the year that were less costly than were anticipated when the budget was finalized. And that resulted in savings of approximately $100,000 overall. Another significant contribution to this was that previous contributions to the Fairburn project were returned in the year, and that amounted to $267,000. So those contributions went back into the reserves and went back into the development charge fund. So the next several pages in the report detail the specific capital projects, what they were budgeted for in 2021, and what the actual costs were. And an explanation of the significant variances. So I'm not going to go into detail on those ones unless there are specific questions. So at this point, I'd like to call on our senior leadership team to provide some insight into 2021's challenges and accomplishments in their respective divisions. So firstly, Lisa Smith with HR.
Thank you, Reva. What can we say about 2021 other than it was a year of transition and learning? 2021 forced us to rethink the entire employee experience, highlighting issues like remote working, well-being, culture engagement, and higher levels of technological support. We learned how to utilize and enhance our tech tools to become more efficient in our employee communications, onboarding, recruitment, and training initiatives. This has made us more adaptable to any future disruptions within the municipality. We learned that the economy and incredibly tight labor market where the cost of living, housing, and rental affordability and availability have had a direct impact on our recruitment and retention, not to mention the impact of the Great Resignation. This resulted in becoming more creative in closing these gaps, utilizing remote work opportunities as an example. For the first time in 2021, we had 5 generations in the workplace at the same time, so everything from traditionalists to Generation Z. We are also shifting from the majority of our workforce having 1 to 5 years experience with the municipality to a smaller percentage being more long-term at 15 plus years. In 2021, there were many legislative not only as a result of the pandemic, but also from a world perspective. Am I back? I can't. Oh, Sorry, am I on now? Okay, perfect. So just going back, there were many legislative changes, not only as a result of the pandemic, but also from a world perspective over diversity, equality, inclusion, and mental health, as well as the Working for Workers Act, which introduced significant changes to employment law in Ontario, resulting in new policies and procedures for our employees. In the coming years, the town will need to continue to be responsive, certainly by revisiting and modifying our current policies and procedures and our entire employee experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. So next up is the Director of Legislative Services, Tanya Kalea.
Thank you, Riva. So I'm not going to outline for you everything that we do in the division because it's in your package, but basically we have the 4 areas within our division, and the first area being IT. IT, Ian, has done a great amount of work last year in getting us all architecturally and system design set. We've had a lot of new initiatives and improvements that he's been able to bring forward that has been missing for the last few years, so that's been phenomenal. The implementation of security practices to mitigate risks, that was another big component that was necessary. He has done a lot of investigating in new technologies and working with lots of our departments on new ways of doing things, new ideas that they perhaps wouldn't even realize we have that capability. Operational support of our digital assets to ensure availability, and he's on the set team with our GIS information coordinator, as well as our records management coordinator. So that's a big component, and what the set team does is every time a new piece of software or anything like that is brought in, they look at a broad view to see, A, do we have the software already capabilities? B, is it accessible? C, is it security? Is the security been considered? D, is it legacy, or is it something that's going to move us forward? So their team effort on that's huge. Jessica, who is our legal and agreements coordinator, she set us up greatly last year for the acquisition and disposition policy needed to be revamped, and our license of occupation policy, she totally took that and blew it apart and put it back together. So it has set us up greatly for now moving forward with all of those. The large amount of shore road and road allowance closures that we have had is astronomical. I think the previous director, Maxwell, who had them, was like a few a year, and it's like 25 a year. It's crazy how they've really grown, and she's taken that and has systematically been able to do all that. And I believe Ms. Frame has told us it's 130,000 last year alone. So that's a lot of work she's been able to do for us. Crystal, our deputy clerk, has been preparing for the election, which of course is this year, but a lot of prep work happened last year, which is you had passed your bylaw for internet telephone voting, and that continues this year, but the prep started last year and is just getting heavier as we go along. You passed a motion last year to allow our records coordinator to do his implementation project, which will be finished at the end of this year. So that has been exciting to move forward on some of the records that were getting digitized. And he's been also working with the building department on that new software that they have. He's been working with the planning department on their stuff with the CPP on helping them get organized for records. So he's got a big project on there, as well as the HR department. The other thing that we did last year was we continued on with the Town Hall Working Group. I know your report didn't come until the beginning of this year, but last year was the continuation of creating all that to get that to you this year. So that is my report, and thank you very much, Ms. Frame.
Thank you. So next up is the Director of Financial Services, Julia Mckenzie.
Thank you. So over the past 2 years, the Financial Services Division has continued to find ways to be more sustainable and increase efficiencies while providing services at the same time. For the most part, the Financial Services Division's records are now electronic. To give you an example, in the past, at any given time, we would have had 2 large filing cabinets filled full of paper invoices. Not only did we have to print these invoices, we also had to move them physically between locations, and we'd also have to store them for 6 years. Now, at any given time, we have these all filed electronically, so any staff member can access these documents from any location at any time. It's quite remarkable the amount of changes that have been able to be accomplished over such a short period of time, which was primarily driven by the needs of working remotely throughout the pandemic and through closures. These changes have greatly reduced the amount of paper and printing needed for our processes and have created better access and records to our staff and the public. Where we can create an online form to better serve the public, we have, and we continue to find ways to provide more accessible ways for the public to access information and request services. Property taxes staff have also had an incredibly busy year in 2021. As noted, the growth and real estate activity in Huntsville has been significant. Overall, we've seen a lot of increase for activity for property taxes that include administration and creation of new roles and assessments, increase in supplementary bills, which generate a lot more inquiries from our customers, increased volumes of phone, internet, in-person, and email inquiries. There's also been a significant increase in the amount of tax certificates being issued on properties, as well as increased address and owner changes to tax accounts. Insurance, once again, has been a significant challenge for 2021 as we move hopefully through the end of the hard market. But the town still continues to find ways to increase risk mitigation efforts and practices throughout the town to hopefully eventually reduce the overall cost of insurance and improve our risk management efforts. So I can't forget to mention the Municipal Accommodation Tax. This is new to the Financial Services Division in 2021 for the administration and collection of the MAP program. And we now have also taken on the collection of the short-term rental and B&B accommodations. This is a relatively new program across Ontario, and Huntsville has taken the lead in best practices in the collection and administration of the MAT. The finance staff have developed many procedures and systems right from the beginning, which I believe will set us up for success in the collection of the MAT for the future. We want to thank council members for your patience for receiving this report at a much later date than we normally do. We've had a lot of challenges this year, which have put us somewhat behind where we normally are. With that being said, though, I do want to take this time to thank our Deputy Treasurer, Reva Frame, for all the work that she's put into this. It's been a tremendous amount of work, and she's put a lot of effort, as well as the rest of the team, into preparing and finalizing the 2021 year end. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Julia. So next up is the Director of Community Services, Simone Babineau.
My chair's too long. That's good. Thank you. Good morning. The investment in our community services ensures economic, social, and personal well-being, as well as a healthy community. The Community Services Division in 2021 budget report reflects the ability to modify programs, shift our focus, and adjust offerings to meet COVID health regulations, customer needs, and community desire. The staff of Community Services have focused on recovery, reinvention, resilience, and the budget reflects our ability to do so through COVID. We have moved many of the facets of our business to online. We are reacting to trends and continuing to do so. We remain fluid in our response. Our focus remains on fiscal responsibility, thoughtful optimism, and customer service. Thank you.
Thank you, Simone. So Kirsten Maxwell, the Director of Development Services.
Thank you. 2021, it seems like it was so long ago that it's all a blur now, unfortunately. The division was incredibly busy, as I know you all are aware, with the additional revenues that were received. We have been trying to update all of the programs as we see issues, and I know there were several amendments to different programs like the short-term rental, accommodation tax program, and the licensing. So we've been working on updating bylaws and trying to address all the issues as they arise. And with the additional staffing that was received approval last year, we've been working much more effectively. And we're going to continue to look for ways to increase our efficiencies and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Maxwell. So last but certainly not least is our newest Director of Operations and Protective Services, Tarmo Ukivi.
Good morning, Council. My recollection of 2021 is slightly different than the rest of the directors. However, that said, I can provide a short summary here. We have had changes in key leadership positions within the division for which recruitment started last year, notably yours truly, as well as our new fire chief. Several construction phases of the Main Street streetscape project were completed. Phases 1 through 3 were completed last year. Securing additional grant funding for capital projects such as the accessibility improvements at Port Sydney Beach and the new Yonge Street crosswalk. There was also the commencement of the waterfront design strategy project with several priority park spaces identified and work getting underway to create public access points to water bodies around town. And last year was the first year of the Lions Lookout rink, which was really very well received by the community. In terms of challenges, not dissimilar to many of those that my colleagues, the divisions, experienced. We had a serious lack of seasonal availability, or seasonal staff availability, which continues to be an issue into this year. Although, particularly in parks, the team is doing a phenomenal job of keeping things looking great. Fuel costs are a huge impact to our operations division, given the road work and the equipment that we do operate. And then in 21, weather events, including flooding, resulted in a lot of unanticipated road work requirements, especially in the spring season, of approximately $320,000. And thank you for your continuing support.
Thank you very much for those summaries. So moving on to the other financial information that's contained in the report. Long-term debt owing by the town at the end of 2021 was just over $5.1 million. So that's approximately $715,000 less than the year before, and that's because of principal repayments on the debt. There was no new debt issued in 2021 or budgeted in 2022. So the last debenture that was issued was actually back in 2010. The long-term debt graph that's included in the report illustrates the balances and the payments and how they're steadily decreasing as the debt's paid off. The next big drop that we're anticipating in principal and interest payments is expected in 2024, and that's because one of the debentures is going to be paid off entirely by the end of 2023. So moving on to the next section, reserves are funds that have already been set aside by the town and are to be held and used for future use. So at the end of the year, the town has approximately $18.7 million in these reserves, which is up from 2020 by about $3.1 million. So some of the significant increases that happened to those reserves in the year included the town surplus of $1.6 million. The building department also had a surplus of just under $460,000, and that's entirely moved into the building department reserve. There were some Ontario Safe Restart funding that was received in 2021, which has been moved into a dedicated reserve and is budgeted to be used in 2022. There were also investment gains and investment income, and this was all realized investment income. And those have been transferred into various reserves, and that equated to about $350,000. There was also the Center Street lease, which was new in 2021. That's about $445,000, and that's transferred into a dedicated reserve every year. And then there was, as Director Kalea mentioned, the surplus land sales, so those road closing allowances, road allowance closings. And those approximated, $130,000 roughly, and those get transferred into capital reserves for future spending. So the next several pages of the report detail the balances and the purposes of each of those reserves that are held by the town. So the next section is about obligatory reserves, and those are essentially funds that are tied to specific agreements or legislation and can only be used for a certain purpose. So included in the Canada Community Building Fund, and this used to be known as the federal gas tax, it was renamed recently, included in that 760,000 roughly is about just over 600,000 specifically earmarked for the Main Street Streetscape project to be used in '22. So in 2021, I think it's important to note that we received, about $1.2 million in development charges. So lots of development happening in 2021, and we spent approximately $270,000 of the development charges. So lastly, but certainly not least, is property taxes. So taxes outstanding have been significantly reduced since 2020 and are now well below the 5-year average. I really think it's important to note a few things with respect to the tax receivable balance. So tax prepayments at the end of the year have increased by over $400,000 from the year before. I did look at a comparison of the March 31st balances between 2021 and 2022, and that gives a good indication of where we were at interim billing. So we're actually, in 2022 at March 31st, we were $1.4 million less than March 31st of 2021. So we're doing a really great job of collecting taxes. I really think it's an important aspect of our tax collection over the last year. So there really has been a significant increase in the number of payment plans that town staff have been able to establish with the property tax owners. So the payment plans allow staff to work closely with those property tax owners, the property owners, to reduce their balances over time. So the manager of taxation regularly reviews our receivables listing and has already begun the final tax notice process for several properties in 2022. So back in January, there were about 70 final tax notices sent. So this is the first step in the tax sale process. Staff have been working with those property owners to establish adequate payment plans in order to avoid those tax sale proceedings, because that's a last resort and we really are trying to avoid that. So since the final notices went out, about 25 of those have either been paid in full or they've entered into an adequate payment plan. So tax sale, has been avoided for those specific properties. So the next chart I wanted to highlight was the supplementary taxes and write-offs. So over the last couple of years, supplementary taxes have been increasing, which we have taken into account in the '22 budget. We have increased that expected revenue. Back in 2020, there were several large tax write-offs, and these were for items from previous years that have now been settled. So again, in 2021, some of the previous year write-offs were settled. So I don't want to say that we're expecting that to decrease because we don't know what we don't know. But at this point, a large part of the larger tax write-offs have now been dealt with. So I did want to end the year-end presentation by calling upon our CAO. I'll let you get a drink first, to provide some words on the past year.
Thank you very much, and through you, Madam Chair. So I won't outline any of the operational challenges because you've heard them from our directors. But what I can tell you is we are all coming out of this pandemic, although it's still not over, totally differently than we went in. We think differently, we operate differently, and I think that's true for probably everyone in their personal lives as well. We had to continually adjust operations, we had to adjust work arrangements, and it was thanks to an amazing team here at the town of Huntsville that we honestly did it without a hiccup. And this is a tough one, not only for our staff internally, it was a tough one for our community. It was extremely tough for all of you as leaders in the community as well. So we really do want to thank you for all your support during some very difficult times. And again, I know we're not out yet, but if we do see an 8th wave come in the fall, we're ready and we're prepared. And we hope that it won't have a huge negative effect on the services that we provide. I do feel that we are a stronger organization coming out of this pandemic, and again, it's due to staff that just continue to show up every day. And there was so much going on, and as Director Maxwell said, it was a complete blur. I can't believe that the past 2 years have gone by, but I look at who we were then and who we are today, and I think as an organization, we should be very proud of ourselves. So a huge thank you to staff. We wouldn't have survived without them. A huge thank you to all of you for your support.
and we look forward to being ready to anything that this pandemic has to throw at us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Denise. So that's the end of my report, and I am available for questions.
Thank you, Riva, and everyone else involved. I think this is an excellent report. I think that everybody's worked hard through these challenging times, and the results are in front of us. So if anyone has any questions, please. Councillor Thompson.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Withy. And yes, I agree with you. That's a great report, Riva and Julia and staff. Great job done. Question I have, and I'm really chuffed about the situation with our debentures, actually, being in great shape, it would seem, and the end is in sight, as they say, right? We avoided a debenture with regards to streetscape, which was fabulous. I know that we have a huge expense coming up with regards to the pool. And you mentioned that we are $18 million in reserves, and that is, again, a phenomenal number, good to see. Are we able to do the renovations to the pool through our reserve situation, or are we looking at a possible debenture in that particular case? Question?
Who's up? Julia?
I can tackle that. So a lot of the reserves have been set up specifically for certain areas. We certainly council can choose to move those around. So the facility reserve currently doesn't have enough money in it to fund the pool as it stands. So I think when the time comes for us to do the pool, we'll be looking to seeing what grants we can get in, which would offset what amount of money we would need. And then we would have to look at it to see if we did want a debenture portion of it, depending on the rates at the time, and or whether we wanted to internally finance it. So we do have a few options there. We're set up nicely for that.
I guess my only comment would be, thank you again, Chair Withy, but yeah, if we can avoid that at all, I think that would be just, so much to an advantage to, I think, to our town, and actually to, I think, to our overall psychological approach to debentures, because none of us like debt, and if we can avoid that as a council and as a community, I think that's a major plus for our town and for our community. Thanks, Chair Withy.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson, and those are great remarks. I think you're spot on there. Councillor Weeb, please.
Thank you, Chair Withy. Again, I echo the same comments. I think it looks like the reserves are in really good shape, and kudos on the dropping of the debts. The question is for, I guess, the CAO. I noticed in some of the notes, especially with your department and some of the other levels of the organization, that during the pandemic, there was always a drop in expenses towards things like conferences and travel and whatnot, either because they were canceled or because they were done electronically. I'm wondering if that's going to be a trend that you see continuing, as in, are there going to be continued savings in those realms because we have the technology now to do a lot of these things over Zoom and whatnot. So can the professional development continue without always incurring travel and these types of costs?
Madam CEO.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So I can confirm that in discussions with organizations that we've been involved with, that there is a huge desire to get back to meeting in person. There's such synergies and so many connections that you can make when you attend the conferences in person. It just is honestly so much more valuable. We are seeing a bit of a hybrid model. For example, a conference that I would participate in the fall, they are looking at doing, if you can't attend in person, doing a hybrid. So I think that will still be offered probably for the next year anyway. But I think for those of you who have attended conferences, you can agree that the online version was just not very beneficial. I myself participated in conferences online during the pandemic, and it's very easy to get pulled away. And I really don't truly think you get the value out of it. So to your point, Councillor Weeb, I do think that you will see no further reductions in that area, because I think in-person is extremely important.
Hello, Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Chair Withy. Just a quick question. I just wondered, do you see any more money coming from the government with COVID-19 recovery? Are there still funds coming through?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to defer that to our Director of Financial Services because she's been more involved with those types of grants and that kind of thing.
Julia?
Thank you. So I think over the past couple of years, we've seen a tremendous amount of grants coming out of the province and the federal government. In regards to the COVID funding, I don't anticipate there being any more funding for that. I think a lot of municipalities struggled to use that funding other than for reducing like the impacts on the levy, because a lot of municipalities were able to reduce their expenditures as they're related to COVID, unless you had something like a nursing home or a major transit system that you couldn't avoid the cost. But in speaking with the ministry, we haven't had any, our representative Diane Plosh, she hasn't given any indication that there'll be anything further to come for that.
Thank you. Your worship.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Riva, you mentioned the development charges. We put in over $1 million this year and spent $270, and I noticed that the balance is over $4 million in development charges. Are we limited or restricted to, I know we are limited and restricted to what we can spend them on, but are we too restricted? Are we growing that fund to a degree that we need to relax some of the restrictions on where we can direct development charges?
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I agree. I think that the amount of money that's been going into the development charge fund over the last few years has been significantly more than we had anticipated. There's a lot of development going on. And we are restricted with what we can use those funds for through the Development Charges Act and all of that stuff. So I don't know if Director Mckenzie wanted to add anything more to that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think that we really need to look at what we're spending that money on the next couple of years, because we do have to spend that money so it doesn't get reduced when we do our next DC study. So we really need to look at the projects we've identified in there and start budgeting to get those projects done, because a lot of them aren't 100% funded by DCs, so that's where we're a bit restricted. So we have to find ways that we can move forward with some of those projects.
Yeah, just follow up, and thanks for that, Julian. I realize the restrictions through the Development Act, but through our DC charges, have we not limited ourselves to where we can spend it? Like, I know we're using development charges to pay off a certain debenture because it was related to growth at the Summit Center. Have we restricted other areas because we're doing it that way, or?
Yep, so through our background study that was done in 2019, we did identify, the town did identify what projects did need to come forward as it relates to growth. So those projects are identified right in the background study for each of the areas that it relates to. We do have some areas where, like for example, parks, where we have increased parkland or increased trails. So we haven't specifically said which trails we're looking at doing, but we can use funding from that to develop those trails. So there is a little bit of leeway in there where we put provisions for some more broad things, but we also have some projects that are in there that we should be using the DCs for. If there is a change and it is related to growth, then we can certainly look at that.
Deputy Mayor Alcock, please. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Withy. I just said, sorry, I didn't know that you could see my hand. Thank you. It's basically a follow-up question to Mayor Terzianos, and that was the use of our DC funds. I was hoping, and I will send this question over to Director Maxwell or to Tarmo, with respect to tying our DC funding to sidewalk development. I know we
generated $16,000 in marriage licenses. How many people get married in Huntsville? That boggles my mind.
And does anyone want to comment on that, or is it, do you have a problem?
No, I didn't. I'm very pleased with reserve balance. That's something through 2 terms, and we've all sat around this table and worked very diligently, so I'm so pleased with that. And I had one more question for Reva, I believe. You mentioned that the tax is not paid, and we had, I think, 70 properties you started with, and you made arrangements with 35 of those people. How many of the remaining properties are in multiple year failing to pay?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair. So those 70 properties that were sent final tax notices have been in arrears for the 3-year period. So this was before we changed the tax collection policy. So those 70 properties, originally it was, and Director Mckenzie, correct me if I'm wrong, it was like 160 properties originally. And we got that down to 70. So the property tax staff have been working really hard to contact those property owners and try and get them on payment plans.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so they've been doing a really great job of getting that number down. So of those 70, 25 have been either paid off in full or have payment plans set up. So, and we're still working with them on whittling that number down.
And just to follow up on that, are we legislated when we have to have tax sales, or is the municipality has the ability to decide that, or?
So I'm going to, correct me if I'm wrong, Julia, but I think that in the Municipal Act, we are allowed to send final tax notices and to start tax sale proceedings 2 years, and that was just recently changed in our tax collection policy. So we can send tax notices after 2 years of non-payment of the taxes. I don't necessarily think we have to, but in our policy that was just recently amended, we have reduced that number to 2 years. And really, it sounds like a bad thing when it was switched from 3 years to 2 years, but it's actually, it gives property tax owners notice sooner that their properties are in arrears. And allows us to work with them with a smaller balance, right? So after 2 years, there's less owing than after 3 years. So it's actually much easier for people to catch up. So, you know, it sounds, oh, you're switching, you're giving them less time, but no, we're giving them a better chance of being able to pay that back sooner.
More manageable, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's, kudos to all the hard work in that department. Now, I believe, did you have a comment on a prior? You were
I'm
sort of
good.
waving at me. Okay, is everybody good?
Just one more follow-up.
Okay.
Chair with you, thank you. When do you anticipate the municipality having another tax sale?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I have not been involved in the tax sale process, so I think Director Mckenzie can speak more to that.
Thank you. So we have started that process. We've been working on it for quite some time, but we have started the formal process. So the year now, I believe with that 70 properties has started. So in a year's time, if they have not paid then, or we've not been able to work with them, then they would have to, then those would go into a tax sale in about a year from last month.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair Withy.
You're welcome. Any other questions, comments? You've heard the motion, so I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. On to 6.1.2, and this is Crystal, and there is a motion here. This is moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Armour. It is recommended the committee approve the amendment to Delegation of Authority Bylaw 2021-17 is attached as Schedule A to Report Corp 2022-68. Crystal.
Thank you very much, Chair Withy. The report is in front of you. Staff are recommending the addition of 3 delegation of authorities, one for sponsorship agreements, one for noise bylaw exemption, and one for rental agreements, as well as proposing an amendment to the existing license of occupation delegation to allow staff to approve license of occupation amendments on top of just the license of occupation. I'm here for any questions.
Questions? Councillor Schumacher?
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. So with the noise bylaw exemption, staff would determine that, and then do we as council get notified if you're, like with the streetscape, that you'd be doing noise bylaw exemption through the night?
Crystal?
Oh, Termo.
Or through you, Chair, yes, there is a notification process where council and senior leadership would be the first to know when we're looking at doing overnight work, and then there would be the public notice that would be going out on media as well as signage and similar requirements to what we had with downtown streetscape all the way through.
Because we'd get the calls at 2 in the morning.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, you've heard the motion. I'll ask the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. On to 6.1.3, Keith Duncan. This is for information only. Environmental Survey Follow-Up Corporate Action Plan. Do we have somebody speaking to this? I don't see Keith. Lisa.
Oh, there he comes.
Oh, and here comes Keith.
You're up.
Your timing is impeccable.
I try, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Chair Withy. Good morning, Council, and I'd like to thank you for your time, like always. I'm here today to provide a quick update on the work that has occurred so far in the engagement survey action planning process. So upon the conclusion of the survey, the senior leadership and leadership teams work closely with their respective teams to review and discuss the results of this survey. By understanding how employees perceive their work experience, leadership was able to identify and prioritize opportunities to make changes through the action planning process. Prioritization, of identified action plan items were undertaken to ensure that too many improvement actions weren't undertaken, because that would start to spread our valuable resources thin. Sorry. As a result of this process, the Town of Huntsville's corporate action plan actually identified 5 drivers of engagement to work on over the short and long term. So those 5, as you can see in front of you, were opportunities for advancement, training satisfaction, senior leadership, communication, benefits satisfaction, and last but not least, safety. And I just want to highlight very quickly, as you can see in the report, for the identified council-related drivers of engagement, the Chief Administrative Officer will focus on and work within the council-approved policies and procedures to ensure areas of opportunity for the current council and future councils are made a priority. So thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have for me.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from anybody? Great. You can exit the way you're in.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to 6.1.4, Director or CAO Corey. This is for information only as well. Lakeland Holding Limited Annual Shareholders Meeting 2021 Annual Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the report is before you for information only. Unfortunately, I wasn't at the meeting. I was at a family wedding. So if there are any questions, I would assume that Mayor Terziano, who was in attendance, will be able to answer those, or I can follow up afterwards if need be.
Any questions, comments? Great. You're off the hook. And you're back on the hook. Exactly. So we have this is 6.1.5, customer service strategy. There is a motion moved by Councillor Armour, seconded by Councillor Thompson. It is recommended the committee adopt the customer service strategy as attached to report CAO 2022-5. CAO Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the report is before you today. It was, as identified in the report, an initiative through the strategic plan and our business plans, which was supported by council. It was in the works, actually, a number of months ago, but unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we had to shelve it for a little bit. So it is before you today for consideration. I did have Lisa Smith assist with the development of the policy, as well as feedback from the senior leadership team and the leadership team. So if there are any questions, I will try to address them, and otherwise, members of the team can address other questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, you've heard the motion. I'll ask the question. All in favor? Thank you, and that's carried. Now, we are on to Chair Weave and Community Services.
Councillor Weave, just
Thank you.
before you start, would you be okay with a break? The clerk's going to
That's-
fix that mic in the background.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks. So we will just delay for a moment, and then we will go on a short break. It's 10:21. Let's try to be back in 5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have the Community Services Division, 6.2.1. I have a motion. It is recommended that the town of Huntsville, or moved by, that is Jan Armour and Tim Withy, seconded by Tim Withy. Boy, those are good ones. It is recommended that the town of Huntsville enter into a one-year partnership agreement with Eclipse Walk with Light for 2022-23 for the use of Muskoka Heritage Place with discounted partnership rental rates in the amount of $34,310 being waived by council and operational costs of $6,500 payable from the Huntsville Lake Bay's Chamber of Commerce. And further that, upon successful funding from the Celebrate Canada grant, Huntsville Lake Bay's Chamber of Commerce be granted ability to activate 1. The front of Town Hall with a new showpiece in October 2022. 2. Kent Park with an interactive installation in October 2022. Number 3, the new King Street walkway with an interactive installation in October 2022. So, Jillian's here. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So the Huntsville Lake of Bays Chamber of Commerce held their first Eclipse Walk with Light and Music Festival at Muskoka Heritage Place Village from November 4th, 2021 to April 2nd, 2022. A total of 34,612 visitors made it out to Eclipse Walk with Light and by extension to Muskoka Heritage Place. 34.3% of those being Huntsville residents, 11.4% being Muskoka residents outside of Huntsville, and a further 54.3% outside of Muskoka. So this provided an opportunity to increase awareness of Muskoka Heritage Place and maximize the use of the site when it otherwise would be dormant in the off-season. It brought new and local visitors and new audiences to Muskoka Heritage Place. Eclipse Walk with Light also encouraged returning visitors to Muskoka Heritage Place during our 2022 season. So we are again interested in partnering with Huntsville Lake of Bays Chamber of Commerce and have been directed to enter into a partnership agreement. And so we're looking to that from council, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you for that summary. Are there any questions from committee at this time? Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Jillian. And yeah, I like the idea a lot. The display that was in front of the town hall last year, I thought was quite brilliant. Is that sort of what you're thinking of this year, the same kind of an idea?
We have Kelly Haywood, Executive Director of the Huntsville Lake of Bays Chamber of Commerce here, and I think she could speak to that.
Why don't you come down? Hi, Kelly. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me. Thank you for the great report, Jillian. Yes. I mean, there's going to be some simile, like it will look something like that, but we're working on the design currently. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Mayor Karen Terziano, and then we're going to go to Deputy Mayor Alcock after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just sort of for clarity, the successful funding from the Celebrate Canada grant, that is a grant for the Chamber of Commerce, not for the town, correct? So just wording's just a little bit confusing there. And the last part, based on that grant, setting up the showpieces in the other areas, I'm just wondering if we should have a line there subject to the building department approval, because I know last year, last minute, we ran into some issues on that, so.
Do you want to turn your mic, both keep your mics on, maybe? Just press, there you go. Okay, I'm going to let that sit for the moment, and I'm going to go to Deputy Mayor Alcock via Zoom.
Thank you, Chair Reid. I just wanted to lend my support. I think this is a great motion, and I, like everybody else, think that the Eclipse event last year was brilliant. I do have a quick question about the 3 proposed locations. I really liked them when I saw them, and I love the idea of bringing down Eclipse further to the downtown and having that connectivity. I've said that before, so that's really cool. I was curious, and I don't know if there has been any thought as to what an interactive installation in Kent Park might look like. And if we're not sure yet, no worries. Just was curious if any thought had been given to that. Thank
Kelly,
you.
do you want to comment?
Thank you. We do already have some engineered drawings of what will look like a canopy. And if you were at Eclipse, at the Village Green, there was sort of a canopy of lights that will exist again this year, and we want to sort of emulate the same thing at Kent Park. So the cool thing about that is it can be any color. It can, be excellent for St. Patrick's Day, for Pride, for Valentine's Day, for Christmas, and it would look just like a beautiful canopy. I think all of the installations that we've talked about for downtown, we'd like to come back in September to council and really, show you what we're thinking and get your ideas and collaboration for those. But yeah.
If I may, just a quick thank you for that, Kelly, and I really look forward to September and seeing those. But I just want to say I'm really thrilled about this motion, so thanks.
Okay. I had a quick question, and that would be a question to Julia, I suppose. What, when we waive fees, can you just explain sort of where that comes from, where it goes, or how that mechanism is in place?
Thank you. So we actually just spoke this week about bringing forward shortly a waiving of fees policy, because we've been working on it for quite some time, but that's still to come. So right now, if it's an existing fee, then you wouldn't see the revenue show up in the account.
Okay. Back to the mayor.
I think just further to that on this particular event, we do generally, when we waive fees, have a source of revenue to offset that. This time, we thought that, like last year, we were becoming a partner in this, so that as much as the waiving of fees, the intent of that is that we will not be charging fees, but are not looking for a place to revenue them from, because we're a partner.
Mm-hmm. I'll go to Councillor Armour and then followed by Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, Chair. Just Chair, a quick question. Are we looking at bringing in any private enterprise this year again, like last year, like food trucks and stuff like that, and making it more of a full entertainment?
Yeah, I mean, that worked really well last year, certainly with Beaver Tails and Canvas Brewery, and we're open to talking to others. And I'll be working with Jillian and her team around how we can engage more private and enterprise, also sponsorship. A lot of this, event and installation is, we're very grateful for the accommodation tax, as well as provincial funding, but I think we should be looking at a sustainable model for the future to try to keep this going, and we want to grow it, so we'll be looking at sponsorship opportunities, potentially vendors, other opportunities for maybe large-scale events, if you want to get married at Eclipse, if you want to have a party, that kind of thing. So I think, last year was our first year, and we were still sort of testing the waters and weren't sure how well it would be received, and I think we now know that it's just such a great thing to have in our community, and we're learning from other communities. There's lots of these light walks across Canada, so we're taking it all in, and I think more vendors would be welcome for sure.
Thanks for that. We are, as you know, becoming the marriage capital of Ontario. So, Councillor Schumacher, to you.
Lots of licenses out there, yes. Well, again, Councillor Armour took my question this time around, but yes, just great work, Kelly and Jillian. Thank you for the report. Yes, it sort of showcased a lot of other things that happen in Huntsville when we had the goat walk, and I think it was Algonquin Outfitters had the snowshoeing event and things like that, so that was great. And again, so the interactive pieces that you're bringing down will tie into, like last year was, I believe, seasons, sort of time, that kind of philosophy. Hopefully you're going to go with a different theme, obviously, this year, but then that tie-in would then come downtown, correct?
Yes, I would say a lot of it, we're going to build on the theme. It will be similar, and a lot of the installations will either be the same or more, and there'll be additional installations not only at Muskoka Heritage Place, but also downtown. Jillian and I have already spoken quite a bit around how we can integrate more Muskoka Heritage Place and engage people more on sort of the buildings and what they, QR codes and that sort of thing. But certainly the installations downtown will have a tie to the theme, for sure. Yeah.
That's great. You want to follow up?
Sure, thanks. Just a quick one. I'm thinking as we work towards getting some hydro up at the rink, the top of the hill, I hope you someday can look into incorporating that into some kind of light shows there in the nighttime as people skate.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the Lions Lookout skating rink, which we brought forward, I think, a couple of years ago, is something we're still very much advocating for and market it together. So Eclipse Walk with Light, like everything we do, is designed and developed specifically to bring people to our community in the shoulder season. It's part of our winter marketing campaign. And the Lions Lookout skating rink is definitely part of that, and we marketed it quite a bit last year, and we'll do that again this year for sure.
Excellent. See if we can get the actual rink lit up. That would be, let me know.
That's the goal.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. We've been, and Kelly, good to see you again in person.
Nice to see you too.
These numbers for visitation are really phenomenal. The numbers for outside Muskoka at 54.3%, are those people that are here and then taking advantage of the EWWL, or are these people that would have come particularly, or do you have that kind of a breakdown? That's probably not a fair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you have a breakdown on whether they were people that were here for another purpose and took advantage of it, or vice versa? Thanks.
It's a really good question. I wish I had an answer. I don't, but I mean, we did do a postal code survey, so we know where they're coming from. We can sort of identify that. We got great feedback from the hotel sector about how happy their guests were. So whether they were coming here just for Eclipse, or if they came here and it was happenstance and they're like, oh my goodness, this is so cool. Either way, they left this community feeling really great about it. And this year we're going to be surveying our guests more. It's tricky surveying people, but we're gonna do a little bit more of that to try to figure that out. But at the end of the day, I think we're just so happy that the people from out of town had something great to do. Not that there isn't enough to do in Huntsville, but it's a really wonderful cultural experience.
Thanks for those comments. I would agree with you that surveying, none of us really like to be grilled on why we're here and where we're staying, right? There's a certain level of being good hosts that would maybe prevent us from being that intrusive. I want to go back to the mayor's comments earlier, and I'm just wondering if there's any more thought on it, or if there's any more idea of adding to this resolution, and if you wanted to just speak to that one more time.
Well, you know what, I would leave it on staff to advise. I mean, it's, if as Kelly said, they have engineered drawings. That's generally, though, what our bylaw department would require if you're going to fix anything. So I didn't know, staff can comment whether it needs to be in the motion or whether it's just understood.
I guess I would direct that possibly to Director Maxwell, if you feel that there would be anything in addition needed, or if the nature of the drawings would be sufficient.
Thank you, Chair Weeb. I would appreciate it if we added it to the motion, just so that staff have that in hand as well. Thank you.
Okay. I will look to the clerks, and we're going to take 2 minutes pause. If anyone has any comments, we can chat through it. If not, we'll break for 2 minutes.
Yeah, no, just to add a line that says subject to approval of the building department. Is really the only amendment. That's what I would move.
So I'll ask a question while we're waiting. So we heard about some of the sort of synergistic events that can go along with Eclipse, notably snowshoeing or walking or what have you. Any others that are kind of in the hopper? Like, I know fat biking is becoming a real winter thing. If an event can be done around that, or any other thoughts that are kind of brewing in the hopper?
Yes, a couple. We'd like to do a wine festival.
Okay.
We'd also like to, if you've sort of wandered around Muskoka Heritage Place, Pioneer Village, it is such a beautiful space. And there are a lot of old sort of logging roads and trails that we didn't utilize this year. That it's a little tricky because electricity in that park is, well, challenging because it wasn't required in the forest. So, it makes sense. But I think trying to illuminate or at least utilize those trails in some capacity is a really big goal. I don't know that we'll make it this year because it is quite an investment. I can't remember what we spent last year in the improvements of electricity at MHP, but it was quite significant. We'll be doing that again. But I don't have a mind for that, but I think what my vision is to have trails lit up right all the way back to, like, let's say the Maple Sugar Shack is quite extensive. So it's the goal to illuminate trails, maybe even just with the festoon lighting, and to incorporate fat biking, more snowshoeing, guided light walks. There's lots of really cool things we can do around astronomy, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, back to the mayor.
Just to finalize that, Kelly, when you did the project last year with your lights up at Heritage Place, did you need engineered drawings or anything from the building department for that part?
No.
Because I'm just talking about the 3 downtown
Correct.
pieces. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So that's good.
Affixed to any public space, right? Yeah.
Any other final thoughts? I'll look to look like we're ready from the clerk's department. And Crystal, I'm assuming you're going to put up the amendment. There it is. Okay. So that's moved by Karen Terziano. I'm going to need a seconder by Dan Armour. So the motion stays as is, and the addition is, and further that, the projects identified in item 1 to 3 above be subject to building staff approval. Pretty straightforward. Okay, I've read the motion. All those in favor? That carries. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Jillian. Oh, right, we have to read the main as amended. So that's moved by Karen Terziano, seconded by Dan Armour. And that's the main motion as amended, so we'll vote all in favor, and that's carried. Not everything is redundant. Okay, so I'm going back to my agenda, and I see Greg Pilling has joined us. So I've got, let me just bring that up real quick. This is for information only. It's the update on the status of the daycare proposal at the Canada Summit Center. Greg.
Thank you, Chair.
Update us.
Good morning, Council. Nice to be back in person. This is my first time in a couple of years. We received the complete proposal from Danielle and Andre within the timeline provided. We are now in the process of vetting it through senior management. So our plan is to bring a completed, vetted proposal back to the table in September. Any questions on that?
Okay, yeah, I'll go to questions. I'm going to go to Councillor Withy first and followed by Councillor Stone.
Sorry, just getting to my spot here. Thank you, Chair Weeb. I was wondering what, in your report, it says it's anticipated this review could complete over the next few months, and then a follow-up will come to General Committee in September with results of the review. So I guess it's just between now and September you'll get this. And I was wondering, because I'm getting a lot of calls by parents interested in enrolling children, do you have any idea when this will be operational?
Through you, Chair Weeb. The proposal outlines about a 6-month renovation timeframe. So once we would get to the stage where we can approve them coming in, it'd be about 6 months after that date.
Yeah, is there any way we can speed that up? I know that's a bizarre question, but there are anxious people out there waiting for this, so.
Through you, Chair
Message
Weeb,
received.
I will definitely let them know, and I think it would be how many employees they can get to do the renovations to speed it up. So
thank you.
I will definitely ensure that's been
Thank you.
passed on.
Go to Councillor Stone next.
Thank you. My question was the same as Councillor Withy's. If they were waiting on us because of our cycle to open just after September, then maybe we should call a special meeting. However, if it's months away from actually being implemented, then we'll wait on them.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions? That's it? Okay, thanks, Greg. Thanks. We'll see you in September.
I'll stick around.
Yes, you will, sure. That's. All right, let me get my motion up. So I've got moved by Dan Armour, seconded by Brian Thompson. Whereas recommendation GC 200-21 postponed a decision on a contract renewal with Tri-Sport Events, Inc. until after the 2022 event had been held. And whereas the 2022 event was held on July 10th, 2022, and whereas the current one-year agreement with Tri-Sport Events, Inc. expired after the 2022 event with no renewal term, and whereas Tri-Sport Events, Inc. is not seeking financial relief / support from the town of Huntsville at this time for the event, therefore it is recommended that the town utilize the standard rental contract with Tri-Sport Events, Inc. for all future events. And further that future race routes use the 2022 routes as attached as Schedules A, B, and C to report CS 2022-25 with the addition of the following. 1. Park Drive closed from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. 2. Full closure of Burnell Road from Princess Street to Town Line Road from 7:30 a.m. to 1:15 p.m. with local traffic maintaining access. 3. Full closure of Burnell Road from Princess Street to Florence Street from, there's a typo there, from 1:15 until 4:30 p.m. with local traffic maintaining access. 4. Full closure of Camp Kitchen Road / Forbes Hill Drive from Park Drive to Lions Lookout Point Road, 7 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And number 5, Old Ferguson Road be reduced to one-way traffic traveling northbound from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for all future events. And further that any changes to this race route in the future be brought back for approval. Greg, you're back.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies for the long
No problem.
motion. I'll start with public feedback from the 2022 event. Overall, very positive. At the time, the social media was very positive with very few negative reactions. Since the writing of the report, we have received 49 additional emails from the public, 47 of them asking or suggesting support for the event, with 2 of more of a negative connotation. The SEAT team provided their feedback as well, and overall, the course went very well this year, had minimal disruption to the community. The OPP did have to do some detouring on Burnell Road due to congestion at the peak time of the marathon and when that started, the run started, due to just the number of racers coming out to just not keep cars in place for so long, so they detoured them through Veterans Way. And that's one of the suggestions in the changes for the future races. But the road closures and these new additions have come from the SEAT team and specifically Bylaw and the OPP on their recommendation. We've looked at it to try to have minimal impact on the community, providing decent detours to not have any of those long delays we've had in the past. The recommendation also includes the last bit of funding that HMATA hadn't covered last year. So the HMATA took over the licensing fee of $25,000 for the 2022 event and also asked for first right of refusal for future events. So staff are recommending that in this light that we also have them cover off the cost of the facility, renting the facility, and any other staff costs that could be covered by HMATA. And due to that, then there would be no formal special request to committee that they could just enter into our standard rental agreement that any renter or event would use. And then the only other request would be, as per SEAT procedures, that we would come forth with any route changes if there are any from this route. So Ironman is requesting that they would keep this route going forward with no additional changes. That's it seems to have had the best impact on the community, and if there is another change that would be suggested, then that route would come back to committee for council's
Okay.
approval.
Okay.
I think that covers everything I wanted to highlight. but
Okay.
Obviously, if we have
We'll go to questions. I'm going to start with Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Weeb. Through you to Greg. Greg, so these closures, how different are these? Because I can't remember the initial request last year, but how different are these requests for closures from what we turned down last year and asked for a whole change in the route, that kind of thing? So is this sort of the same kind of request as we had last year that we turned down?
Through you, Chair Weeb, if we go back to the 2021 event, that had the Burnell Road full closure, and that had a lot of issues, and it closed early. We actually had a lot better weather this year too. It was torrential rain in 2021. The 2022 race had just the closure of Park Drive from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., and that was the only approved road closure for the event that just happened a few weeks ago. So the additional suggestions from the OPP and Bylaw are points 2 through 5 on the report. So those are new suggestions on keeping the race safe, the town flowing. We don't want to restrict any access for any residents or any businesses, so anybody who lives on Burnell Road would still maintain access. They would still be able to get in and out of their homes as normal. And then detours are much smaller as opposed to the closure we had in 2021 was Burnell Road, and if I remember correctly, it was from Veterans Way all the way down to North Mary Lake Road, really handcuffing a lot of properties, approximately 500 properties if I remember correctly. And this one will just provide some detours where you would go up from Florence Street, West Street, and then you'll make your way to Town Line through, I think it's Hubble Crescent. I can't remember the exact route. I'd have to pull up the map. Just a little detour there. And then at 1:15, we'll shorten that to strictly to Princess to Florence. So you're right back down to Burnell because the Town Line section will be the bike will be done at that point. So those are the changes, are 2 through 5.
Is this a follow-up?
Yes, thanks, Chair. So I guess at first blush, this is less onerous than what we turned down last year. And what you're saying, Greg, is that the points 2 through 5 are at the recommendation of the OPP?
OPP in combination with Bylaw.
I see. Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Deputy Mayor Alcock via Zoom first, and then I'm going to circle back to the side of the table because this is where the action is.
Thank you, Chair Weep. And actually, Councillor Thompson kind of covered my first question, which was with respect to the suggestions, and I'm pleased that the points 2 to 5 were suggestions from the OPP, and I'm assuming that this is satisfactory with all of the parties that would sign on to the contract then with Tri-Muskoka as well. So those changes. And I'm seeing your head nod, Greg, so that I'm assuming is a yes, that's good. Second,
yes.
Okay, then the second one, I'm absolutely supportive of this motion. I really think this is a fantastic event, and I was really pleased to see that the results from this year were, as you said, 47 of 49 emails have all been really positive, and I've actually read most of them. So I think this is a tremendous event, and I think as a council, it's really important to show our support. One thing I from your motion, you're basically saying if we support this today, then we no longer have to deal with this every year as the event comes around. We're giving assurance to the tri-athlete community that it's a go. It's just a case of signing a contract with staff.
Through you, Chair, that is correct. That was the idea, was give them some security. They do want to have a long-term relationship with us. They've got
Right.
the anticipation of planning 6 more years with us,
Right.
but they would go at a year-to-year contract.
Okay,
with
and
us.
thank you for that. And, sorry, Chair Weeb, but just one
ahead.
last, because it's tied to that, and that is, so there is a defined period of from now until year 2026, is it? Or 20, something like that?
correct. Through you, Chair Weeb. I think they've identified dates right through to 2027.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Withy, followed by Councillor Stone, followed by Councillor Armour.
Thanks, Chair Weeb, and thanks for the report. I want to begin by saying I'm not anti-triathlon. I do struggle with some of the components of this report. Off the top, I'm wondering that they've identified these dates right through to 2028, and they're all in July. And I know a number of people are, as well as myself, are wondering why we can't get this back into September or out of the summer months, just because it's so disruptive to other tournaments and things that are going on at the same time. I'm also curious where it says full closure but local traffic maintaining access, that I don't quite understand how that's full closure and how that works and how you define local traffic. I mean, anybody that drives up to one of these places, they're not gonna question where they live, I don't expect, but it can't be full closure while still maintaining access. So basically my concern is that there's right through to 2028, they've identified July dates. I'm not actually very happy with that. I'd love to see that move to either June or September and get it out of the busy summertime for all the other activities that are going on and the influx of people that come for other reasons than this. And then that question about the closure is kind of baffling me a bit. So I do agree that it went well this year, certainly compared to the prior year, but still concerned that it's looking at July. I would rather see it moved. Thank you.
Greg, anything you want to address there?
Through you, Chair Weeb. Regarding the date change, I know Nick's been here and has addressed that question, that it falls into the global triathlon schedule with Ironman, and it's difficult for me to comment further than that without having Nick and Trisport here to speak directly to that, but the dates are all identified as the same weekend. It's kind of the second weekend in July, depending on how Canada Day and Independence Day fall. That's what flexes the change on that date, just so it's not falling on the holiday. Regarding the road closure, it's a full road closure that anybody that would just be passing through. If you have a residence or a business on that area, the OPP would be speaking with you, allowing you to get to your residence specifically. So you would stop there's a paid duty officer at that intersection controlling the traffic. So you'd have to be a vehicle that would ask the OPP to go through to your home, and they would allow you to go through when it was safe to do so. So it's a full road closure for the local traffic, but you're correct, it's still partially open to the local residents.
You want to follow up?
Yes, thank you, Chair Weeb. I think I have problems with that as well. I mean, this is one of the big issues that we had 2 years ago, was the full closure, where we didn't have to do that this past year or this recent event. And to switch back to full closure, I think there'll be a lot of pushback locally about that. It seems like an onerous process for people to try to get anywhere. Anyway, those are my issues. Thanks.
Councillor Stone.
Thank you. Two things, if we could. So item number 5, one-way traffic on Old Ferguson. Is it one way or one lane?
Through you, Chair Weeb, it would be one lane, one way. So it'd be northbound traffic only, and then detour then would be Highway 11 down to Medill to get back to.
Thank you. And my second point is, like we've already heard, any full closure of Burnell, I'm afraid I can't support it. We would be putting ourselves back into harm's way if we did it again in the public's eye, in my opinion. Now, it's a recommendation from the OPP and bylaw, apparently. In spite of that, it went ahead this year, maybe a little problematic, but nonetheless, it wasn't a full closure. We got the job done. People loved the event, as we've heard in all the letters that came. So unless items 2 and 3 are taken out, I can't support this, but I do love the event.
Councillor Armour, and then followed by the mayor.
Thank you, Chair Weeb, through you. I have to admit, this is the first time in many years I never got a phone call from the press. So fabulous, fabulous. I love the route. Let's send them that way again. The short closure, Brunel Road, I think the OPP decided to close it this year for a short period, just for the transition. I think if we go down that route again, we'll let the OPP control that because they know the safety at the time. So not making it a full closure, but letting OPP know that it needed to be closed through a transition, let them close it. My second part, when I'm reading the options here, says the town approved the race route to be used for future Ironman events as well as utilizing our standard rental contract for tri-sports. I don't read this as approving the next 6 years. I just read this as approving next year only. Is that what I'm reading into this, or are you asking today for us to approve it for the next 6 years?
Through you, Chair Weeb, asking today to approve the route that they would use pending. If they wanted any changes to the route, they'd have to come back. If they maintain the same route and there was no request from council, council can always request us to come back with the route after any event, so we can always readdress the route. But if it's, keeps your phone ringing less, then the idea would be we keep the route the same and not affect anybody, and then we wouldn't come back to council unless the route was changed, and they would just do a year-to-year contract with us.
Right, so this isn't, we're not actually approving a 6-year contract here. We're just approving the route, and they can come back if they want to make a change. Okay, I'm in favor of it.
Correct, that's correct.
Perfect, let's go.
Mayor Terziano.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to Greg. So, a couple of things. First off, I guess I'll just pick up with Councillor Armour's conversation. So what this actually says is whatever we approve today, we're approving in perpetuity as long as the Ironman wants to come back here. And I guess my question is, do we have an out if we ever decide that we don't want them to come back here? Because this doesn't have any contract attached to it. The second, with the Park Drive and Camp Kitchen Road closures all day, how do the athletes and the volunteers and things access the area? Does that mean you're prohibiting cars from coming in there for the entire event? Or I'm sure you have people who come and go sometime between 7 and 4. And the detour that you're proposing with the closure of Brunel Road, seems to me that there's generally parking allowed, at least on one side of the street on that detour route, which I could see being problematic. And I guess my final point is, I think this year we finally got it right by not allowing any full road closures, because as Councillor Armour said, our phones didn't ring. We actually have heard positive comments about the Ironman, and I don't know why we want to undo something that we finally got right. And so with the full road closures, I won't support it. And the OPP section in the report didn't say anything about full road closures. And if they deem it necessary to detour cars at any time for an hour or something, that's strictly the OPP's jurisdiction. So those are my points.
Anything to add?
Through you, Chair Weeb, I will try to address all these. We always would have an out because our standard contract has an out clause for the town to make that decision, so we have that ability, and council can always direct staff to bring back. Like if there was an unsuccessful event, we can come back with another review of the event, and we can always readdress the route anytime, so you wouldn't be bound by it. If you wanted to come back, we can come back. Access to Lions Lookout is maintained through Forbes Hill Drive, so there is controlled traffic right at the Lions Lookout Point Road. So we use Lions Lookout Field for parking. There's about 450 cars up there, and they can get in and out throughout the day through Forbes Hill Drive and through the Rock Cut. The detour route planning, that is something we can definitely control with Bylaw, because we put out the temporary no parking signs for the event. And that's something that we can definitely ensure we no park the detour routes. And the no road closures, and totally understand that the wording is there in the motion. The idea with the second part, with local traffic maintaining access, was the idea of not presenting it as a full road closure, that they still have access. But given what the OPP did this year, there would be no harm in that at all in any way, shape, or form, because if the OPP deem it that it needs to close, that's their prerogative, that's their mandate, that's what they will do.
Okay, I'm going to go back to Councillor Armour, and I'm going to follow back with Councillor Stone.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'm just wondering if we can just amend that to say that that section will be closed at the discretion of the OPP during transitions. If you could bring that back to Tri-Sports, and I think that's what I'd like to see.
Okay, yeah, Crystal, go ahead.
Thank you. Just looking for clarification on the amendment. I'm hearing that right now, number 2 and 3 coming out. A question for our manager. Do we need to put in here that the OPP have the authority to close the road? Because I believe that falls within their jurisdiction anyways. So I just didn't know if you needed that in the motion.
Yeah, through you, Chair Weeb, I would think we could probably just eliminate them because the OPP has that discretion without the motion.
I'm going to go to Councillor Stone, but I think you're on the same
I was
page.
simply going to move
Okay.
a motion to remove items 2 and 3.
Okay. So is there a sec? I see a few hands bolt up. That was that's his, sure. Seconded by the mayor. And I see the deputy mayor looking to weigh in, and I'm going to go to her while Crystal types.
Thank you, Chair Weeb. I just wanted to echo, I would support the last statement, the removal of the 2 clauses. It was my understanding, though, that they were there because it was trying to be consistent with what the OPP did. And so it was trying to emulate what happened this year, but maybe I misunderstood that. So therefore, I'm happy to see those 2 withdrawn if that complicates things.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, you ready to put it on screen? Okay, so there's nothing added to the motion, but the amendment has bullets 2 and 3 removed, struck out. And you can see that. So now I'm going to call the question. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of this motion as amended, of the amendment. And that carries. So now the main motion to be voted on as amended. All those in favor?
Could we ask the questions first?
I called it.
I had my hand up first.
I know. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. That carries. Okay, thanks all, and 5. Thanks, folks. Brian, over to you.
Thanks, Councillor Weeb. And good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, we only have one item coming out of ops today, but it's a significant one. Moved by Councillor Armour, seconded by Councillor Withy. Recommended that committee accepts the Fire Services Master Plan as completed by the consultant, Emergency Management and Training Incorporated, and attached to report OPS 2022-29. And further, that staff report back on the creation of a board to oversee fire services delivery for Huntsville and Lake Bays, and further, that the Fire Services Master Plan be used as a reference document for council and staff to develop a strategic approach to fire services delivery. And we have our director with us, Tarbo, so the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Thompson. The master plan basically provides general suggestions that can be used by council and staff as a reference for developing a strategy for the future of Huntsville Lake Bays Fire Services. There's a summary of themes that can be interwoven throughout the document, but it can be basically broken down into 2 parts in the immediate sense. The first one is looking at the oversight and administration of fire services for both Huntsville and Lake Bays. And the second part is addressing a more urgent need in terms of fire protection and prevention. or sorry, not protection, prevention and promotion. In terms of the fire services oversight and administration, the master plan really provides guidance to have a look at how the fire services are administered for the town of Huntsville and the township of Lake of Bays. We really want to look at an efficient and inclusive oversight model that allows fire services to make the best resourcing decisions for the community served. And the way my analysis has kind of broken this out is to review the fire department services administration services agreement as an essential first step. But we can't do that in isolation. We have to do that together with the township of Lake of Bays. So that oversight board, and I'm not tied to that term as a kind of a legal structure or entity. We would have to look at what we would term this public board. And it would be a public structure with opportunity for public input. That would be an essential first step. So then we review that agreement, the administration services agreement. And then once we've agreed on the contents of the agreement moving forward, then it becomes a question where that board would make recommendations to both Town of Huntsville and Township of Lake of Bays councils on level of service, and determining one level of service for both municipalities is the most effective and efficient way forward. Once that level of service is established, then at that point, you would use the fire services master plan to help guide the development of a strategy for the future of fire services delivery. From that, we would look at using the data, the master plan, to review all of the different types of agreements that are made under that, including automatic aid, mutual aid, medical aid, and so on. And that would be kind of the first step from the recommendations flowing from there. It's the easiest and most efficient way forward in terms of using that master plan information. Part 2 is the fire prevention and promotion. So at this point, the master plan has identified a very significant need, as has our staff, our fire services staff. There's a very heavy workload on our in Huntsville with respect to fire prevention and promotion. So much so that the service delivery is being delivered at the expense of not or providing very limited prevention activities for Lake of Bays Township. So this is something that needs to be addressed in the very near future, with council considering the addition of fire prevention personnel going forward, and that is one of the key recommendations out of the master plan. So for all these reasons, I'm recommending that the master plan be adopted as a reference document and for council, and in addition to the reference document, recommending that council consider having staff move forward and investigate the formation of an oversight board and reporting back to council with options for that.
All right, thank you, Timo. Any questions of our director, Councillor Armour?
Through you, Chair Thompson. Termal, thanks for bringing this forward. The Fire Services Oversight Board, who do you see sitting on that board? Would it be council members or just firefighters?
Termal?
Through you, Chair Thompson. That would be a council decision as to what the composition of that would be. In preliminary discussions and analysis, it would be composed of staff from both Lake of Bays and Huntsville, but led by members of council from both municipalities.
Anyone else? Okay, I asked the question. All those in favor? Passed. Carmel, you're a genius. Thank you. And now... That was short. And now Councillor Fitzgerald has the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Just going to pull up Richard. It is recommended that bylaw and policy amendments attachments report DEV 2022-128 be adopted and support the implementation of the Town of Huntsville Community Planning Permit Bylaw. And further that staff be authorized to forward the attached bylaw amendments to be dealt with once all previous applications have been disposed of and the CP bylaw is in effect. Richard, welcome.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the report before you highlights changes that must be made to various bylaws and planning-related policy documents to facilitate community planning permit bylaw implementation. As committee is aware, Official Plan Amendment Number 1, which dealt with technical amendments to official plan policies to permit passage of a community planning permit bylaw, was adopted at Monday's regular council meeting. Also approved was the passage of the final community planning permit bylaw itself. As committee is aware, the new community planning permit bylaw introduces a new development approvals process for the town, which allows the combination of separate Planning Act approval processes related to zoning and site plan control into one. This will allow for a more streamlined approval process for applicants. And with this new process, several of the bylaws and policies we currently use for the planning process will need updating. Staff has reviewed the key bylaws and policies, and the red line changes contained in the attachments are what needs updating at this time. It should be noted that some bylaw changes should occur now, and some will need to be addressed at a later date once older applications in progress have been disposed of and the new bylaw is in effect. Further, though not outlined in the report, it should be noted that our current cash in lieu of parking bylaw, which was approved in 1989, will also be reviewed, and we'll report back on amendments needed at a later date for that bylaw. Staff is recommending that the bylaw and policy amendments attached to the report as attachments 1 to 9 be adopted now, and when all previous applications in progress have been disposed of and the new bylaws in effect, additional bylaw amendments as described in the report will be necessary. The report's recommendation and the motion that Mr. Chair just read does not exactly say what it should, and in relation to what I just covered. So we are recommending an amendment, and Crystal has a copy of that amended motion that she can put on the screen for everyone. So apologies for that, and I thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Richard. I'm sure there's going to be a few questions. I'd like to take a moment and respond to the clerk.
Thank you. If you could just read the mover and seconder of the motion for me.
I was going to do that, but
Thank you.
I noticed when I was looking at it that I had omitted that part. Moved by Councillor Weave and Councillor Thompson. And questions, and I saw Deputy Mayor Alcock with her hand up first.
Thank you very much, Chair Fitzgerald. Quick question, Richard. One of the policies I think that you referred to in the report is the dark sky friendly policy. And just for the benefit of some of us, including me, how that works. If you're removing the dark sky friendly policy, how is it incorporated into the new community planning permit planning process? Because the policy still is important, still remains. And so it's really just an implementation question, because it's an implementation motion. So if you could walk us through how that would work, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. So the bylaw related to outdoor lighting, it's not being removed. It is being slightly amended, and the language is just being changed to allow for the community planning permit bylaw as a tool for implementing it, whereas currently it only addresses site plan control. So it's a minor tweak just to ensure that we can also address dark sky friendly lighting through the community planning permit bylaw. And that's what's on the floor. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Fitzgerald. I have some questions, I guess. I know that there were some members of the planning community that had been asking for this to be postponed. I think because if I'm recalling correctly, there were some questions with regards to the lack of clarity with regards to development around golf courses, that kind of thing. And I'm just wondering also, given the fact that we could very well be in lame duck situation quite soon, and also there is a potential of a new council having quorum and being entirely new councillors that have never been on council before. So I'm looking at all of those possibilities, and I'm wondering if maybe there is a argument for postponement of this.
Richard, would you care to respond?
Certainly. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the question. So I assume the postponement that you're referring to is related to the community planning bylaw itself. And that bylaw has already been passed, or that was Monday. We brought that forward, the final document, and the bylaw was passed. These are changes to various bylaws related to planning matters, just to help implement that bylaw. So the timing of these changes, we needed to bring them forward now so that the community planning permit bylaw, once it passes through the appeal process, these changes would be in place to allow for implementation of that bylaw. So I believe we would be able to bring this forward at is it September's council meeting? If there are appeals to the bylaw itself, then those appeals will be dealt with through the Ontario Land Tribunal, and the community planning permit bylaw would not come into force until all those appeals are addressed. So there's two different things going on, I would say. So those questions about postponement, we've already dealt with those, and if there are any appeals related to the bylaw, they'd be dealt with through a separate process.
So then, thank you, Mr. Chair. So then, actually, then what I would be requesting, I guess, then, in the event would be a reconsideration in the January or the September council meeting then.
So if I understand correctly, yeah, so these would be coming back for passage in September. So yeah, if there is anything that would need to be looked at further, you'd have the opportunity then.
Right, okay, thank you.
Councillor Weeb.
Thank you, Chair Fitzgerald. Thanks, Richard. I'm wondering, one of the changes that are needed is essentially deleting the Committee of Adjustment and Planning Committee, for what it's worth, and forming a complete planning council. In the past, there's always been members of the community sitting on adjustment, for example, and sometimes being chaired by a community member rather than a member of council. I'm just wondering if any thoughts have been given to that change in what would essentially be the new planning committee and the omission of citizen participation.
Thank you, Richard.
So thank you. Good question. Through you, Mr. Chair. The change there is related to the new approval process. So the Committee of Adjustment primarily deals with minor variance applications and consent applications. So the minor variance process will no longer be applicable because we're getting rid of the zoning bylaw through this process. And things that normally would have been in front of the Committee of Adjustment for minor variances would be dealt with through a permit process. So it's part of the streamlining process that that we're implementing, that we're getting rid of one of those approvals. So I would say that's the reason for getting rid of it. And then that leaves consent applications, so land division, dealing with the creation of single lots, usually. We felt that authority for approving many of those applications has already been delegated to staff, and the Committee of Adjustment is really only needed when there's a concern raised by an adjacent resident, for example. So there are few and far between in terms of what goes to the Committee of Adjustments. So that's why we thought it would be more appropriate to just try and consolidate those committees into one. And that can be revisited at a later date, but that's currently what we were thinking.
Any further questions? Mayor Terziano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Richard, most of these changes will come into effect the date that the CPP bylaw comes into effect. We realize it can be appealed, and we realize the district has to pass the OP amendment. Do you have, well, should I say, without an appeal and with the district moving quickly on this, do you have an anticipated effective date of the CPP bylaw? Like, and I guess what I'm getting at, is it even likely to be during this term of council?
Optimistically. Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. The appeal period would be 20 days from when the OPA is approved by district. So I believe that could occur as quickly as, optimistically, that could occur as quickly as the end of August. So if there are appeals, though, it would take however long it takes for those appeals to be dealt with. So that's all I can say to that.
So just further, if I may, Mr. Chair, so the bylaw cannot come into effect while it's under appeal? We would operate under the old system?
Yeah, exactly. We would deal with everything that's before us, in progress, or submitted prior to the commencement of the bylaw in accordance with the current rules. And that's why we can't get rid of, that's why we can't make a lot of these changes until the bylaw comes into effect.
Any further questions? Yes.
Would you like me to pull up the proposed amendment, the administrative amendment?
I would.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have a motion to amend moved by Nancy Alcock and seconded by Mayor Terziano. It is recommended that the bylaw and policy amendments attachments to report DEV 2022-128 be adopted and support implementation of the Town of Huntsville Community Planning Permit Bylaw. And further that staff be authorized to forward the attached bylaw amendments to be dealt with in conjunction with the implementation of the CPP bylaw at a later date as outlined in report DEV 2022-128. And last opportunity to speak. Okay, all in favor? And that is carried. Okay. Now the main motion is amended. That's good. Again, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. moving on, folks. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Withy Scribble. It is recommended that committee concurs with the community brand direction as presented by TWG Communications at the July 27th, 2022 General Committee meeting, and further that staff be directed to continue to work with community partners on brand collateral rollout. And here we go.
Can you hear me?
Welcome, Lauren. We can hear you.
Okay, so through Chair Fitzgerald, or is it through Councillor? Okay, so through Chair Fitzgerald. This report is an update on the direction of the community brand as presented by TWG Communications earlier today. Extensive public and community partner consultation was conducted to develop the brand. The motion here today is to seek support of the brand direction in order to begin next steps. The next steps would be to work with consultants and community partners on how this brand collateral will roll out in regards to the brand system. So a brand system includes things such as the fonts, colors, how it works in advertising, how it works with municipal and partner logos, signage, wayfinding, posters, etc. So I'm here to answer any questions that you may have, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Lauren. Questions? Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Fitzgerald. Through you. Yeah, I earlier on we discussed this, and I think we all liked the idea, loved it. My question, I guess, is with regards to the font that we all seem to like for the word Huntsville. And I should have asked this, I guess, at that point, but how would that be, that font, will that be used in the wayfaring signage type of thing as well? Because discussing the font with Councillor Wiebe, it seems like almost a combination of cursive and non-cursive as well. So I'm just wondering how you see that happening in the wayfarer signage. Yeah.
So through you, Chair Fitzgerald. So with a brand system, that would be the next steps that we would be looking at rolling out. So today we're here to focus on the actual direction of the design, which is that what they presented today, which was the logo and the unique type for that. However, with the brand system and the logos within that and the fonts the fonts within that, they will be more refined and of course something that's available to our different partners to utilize, and it would take into consideration all the things such as accessibility and legibility and all those unique things when it comes to designing a branded identity.
Councillor Armour.
Through you, Chair Fitzgerald, just a quick question about the branding itself. So the branding, is it patented, or can anybody use this branding afterwards to use for T-shirts, et cetera, like that, or would they have to come through the town?
Through you, Chair Fitzgerald. So it wouldn't be patented, but it is something that the town is purchasing and that we would own. Therefore, you would have to come through the town to utilize. And of course, we would work with our community partners to make sure that we're all on board and implementing it in the correct way that the brand identity and vision intends it to do so.
Follow-up, Councillor?
Not so much a follow-up. I can just see it now, how gorgeous that's going to look at the light show and the new colors coming through into Huntsville. So perfect.
Okay, Councillor Withy.
Thanks, Chair Fitzgerald. I obviously read this, but I'm just reflecting back to what Councillor Stone said about further community consultation now that this step has been taken, and I don't know if that's relevant with this or not. And maybe Councillor Stone might add.
Councillor Stone, do you have further comments on that?
So yes, it is on my mind. We know that they did a survey of just over 300 people in the creation of this. And I think that's wonderful. And before this motion is actually ratified at the next council meeting, which will be September, I believe. So that gives us almost 2 months to hear back from the public. I do hope that the press picks up on this particular logo branding, and we hear the comments back from the community, and I hope it's positive. I really like it, but I would like more input from the public.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. I'm sure that will be hot off the presses before we even leave this room today. Lauren, wouldn't you like to comment
Sure,
about
so-
Councillor Withey's and Councillor Stone's remarks?
Through you, Chair Fitzgerald, we have done extensive community consultation in order to develop the brand. Our working group consists of members from the Chamber, the BIA, and HMATA, all of which who have a large, what is the word? They've all been involved in, tourism and branding initiatives. They have a lot of experience with this. So they've all been consulted. We've made sure to have them part of the engagement process, in addition to over 305 responses from the community. And so that's your information. And ultimately, this is to seek whether you support the direction in order for us to continue with the brand collateral rollout. If it's something that you are looking to evaluate in regards to additional consultation, that's something that we'll have to review. For the RFP did not include that additional stage, so we would have to go back and review that for timelines and budget.
Thank you, Lauren. Your Worship, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I kind of agree with Councillor Stone, but I think the fact that this will be out in the public for the next basically 2 months, we'll get the amount of feedback we need. But my question is still about the branding, and I understood what the consultant said about, we've got this sort of diamond thing going on, and that could be incorporated. Are we actually, when we start, I know they're not street signs, but they're directional signs, such as where the Summit Center is, are we actually thinking about using this new font that's developed for us in the wayfinding signage, or, as well as potentially the colors, or?
So through you, Chair Fitzgerald, that's all part of the actual brand system. So that needs to be determined as to what the look, the feel, the visual story, that has to all be developed. Right now, it's whether council supports the initial direction that we're headed and the consultants are headed with. So that was the design that everyone involved in the working group supported, and they like that look and feel. They like the custom font, the fluidity within that. And so now, if that is approved today, then we can work on the collateral branding rollout, which would then encompass your wayfinding signage. And that's what the consultants would work on to identify. So at this point in time, they might consider incorporating elements of that diamond pattern in it, or the colors, but how that all looks and how that coordinates, that's still to be determined in the branding system. So if we have approval to move forward with the initial concept that we've presented today through TWG, we can work on refining that and moving forward and coming up with the design concepts for wayfinding or posters and such.
Thank you, Lauren. I believe, Councillor, do you follow up, Worship, or? Okay. Councillor Thompson was next, and we'll go to you, Councillor Weep, after that.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I guess my comment with regards to further consultation with the public is I wouldn't bother going there. I think Lauren, you've answered that question. I think that was also answered with the presentation we saw earlier today with the amount of input from the community and stakeholders and so on and so forth. And the mayor's right. We'll hear about it regardless. What we're going to experience over the next 2 months type of period. But in terms of making it an amendment or part of this resolution, I'd be totally against that from the get-go. So that's just my comments for that, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson and Councillor Weeb.
Thank you, Chair Fitzgerald. I concur with those comments. I think designing something using Facebook comments might be a bad road to go down. But the one question I have is, so the budgeted amount thus far, should we decide, you know, we don't really like where it's at, let's take another go, do we have to reallocate new funds? Or is there still money left in that working budget? Or give me the lay of the land in terms of where we're at in terms of expenditures.
Through you, Chair Fitzgerald. So in the RFP process, we have what we have asked the consultants to commit to and what they were asked to design and how many presentations and the engagement process in general. So at this point in time, we would have to take a pause and review it and report back.
And Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Yeah, I mean, we definitely will hear the feedback over the next 2 months, so we don't need to add that. So we're looking at branding, looking at sign. Are we still embrace the past, touch the past, embrace the future? Is that still our tagline with this, or does that negate everything else that we've kind of done up to this point?
So through Chair Fitzgerald, the corporate logo and slogan is still in place. So that's the municipal logo and slogan. What we are looking at is the community brand that would then be embraced for tourism and economic development initiatives and assets. So things that we would work with our community partners to help implement with that kind of fun, fresh, new design, especially in advertising and promotions and marketing.
Okay, yeah, because I attended the stakeholder meeting for HMATA. They were talking about, you know, each having bags that might say Huntsville that each, you know, business would then maybe hand out as a reusable bag option. So we're looking at that type of thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, through Chair Fitzgerald, that's correct.
Thank you. Any further questions? Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one more. Councillor Schumacher raises a good point. So I like this new brand, but I don't think it goes with our Touch the Past, Embrace the Future logo. I can't see how we now incorporate those two together.
Lord?
But I'm not, you know, one of these designers, so.
So through Chair Fitzgerald, as part of the branding system, that would be determined with the consultants in the working group how to best utilize it. So we would review in a brand manual, when you do design work and things like that, you would have it laid out in the standards as to how the municipal logo would be used or the municipal brand versus the actual community brand and the community logo. And in that would be then developed and shared with the partners and how they would utilize and implement it. At this point in time, the community brand is what has been allotted in the budget. So we'll leave it with that. So.
Thank you, Lauren. Any further questions? Deputy Mayor Alcock, I see a yellow hand on your screen.
Thank you, Chair Fitzgerald. I'll be very short. I just wanted to reinforce what I said before. I do like the logo, the brand as presented, and the fact that it's a direction. And so I absolutely support this motion. And I look forward to the next phase if it passes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Alcock. I have one question. What do you anticipate in working with TWG, the timelines of moving forward and when we actually have some branding and wayfinding signage and signs in the ground?
Okay. Through you, Chair Fitzgerald, that's a robust question, of course. If this should pass today, that would allow us to start working on it and working on the collateral throughout the month of August and hopefully September, which can then potentially make it into the next cycle. But it really just depends on the starting point as if it's approved.
Well, great. Well, I look forward to deciding on shapes and colors and locations of signs. So thank you, everyone. If there's no further questions, I will call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. All right. I have another moved by Councillor Withy and seconded by Councillor Weeb. It is recommended that the leisure activity guide reserve be closed, and further that the remaining reserve funds in the amount of $4,745 be transferred to marketing in 2022 to be utilized for photography and other marketing resources. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you, through you, Chair Fitzgerald. So I'm here to provide a leisure guide update, and I'd like to, there's a lot of information in the report, but I'd like to summarize for you guys today a few details. The leisure guide has always been a fantastic tool for us to market and communicate our community services, in addition to hearing and using radio, social media, and huntsville.ca. Can you hear, am I close enough? I might yell. But obviously, the COVID pandemic closed our facilities. We had to shut down our programming, and we obviously haven't printed a guide since the fall of 2019. So in terms of this product, the pandemic highlighted that we really need to be a little bit more adaptive with how we market our programs and community services, as the guide was a key tool for us, and we love the function of that product, to be able to see at a glance what our programs are for a duration of time and to flip through and to kind of plan your season. So to address this kind of future waves and to be more innovative in our marketing strategy, we will be producing a digital format of the leisure guide. There are many benefits which I've outlined in the report, a lot of which provides efficiencies for staff and for our customers, as well as to provide a more enriched experience. And what I mean by that is it will be an interactive format. It can have video, and we can do a lot more because we're not bound by page count or the costs of printing numerous pages. So more images, more information about our community members who do enjoy our programs. We do have a lot more flexibility in that. And one of the other areas that I'd like to note is that it will be easier for our customers to flip through the guide online or on their mobile device, see a program that they want to know more about or potentially register, and it'll be very easy to click it, be redirected to the sign-in for Perfect Mind, and be able to register quickly. So no more memorizing course codes, or it hopefully will be a more efficient process. The other thing I'd like to note is that obviously we're very mindful of accessibility. One, not all of our residents have access to high-speed internet or potentially a smart device. So we are designing the guide in a format that can be printed, or certain pages can be printed at customer service for at the Canada Summit Center. And really the guide is an additional tool. All of the information that will be in the guide will be highlighted on huntsville.ca and in Perfect Mind. And we do have accessible abilities through alt tags and alt images. So our website is very up to date and has great screen reading capability. So all of the information will be there. And just finally, the motion, because we're not printing the guide, we're asking to close the reserve and transfer the money into the marketing budget. But thank you so much for your time, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Lisa. And I see Councillor Thompson is first up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Fitzgerald. Yeah, really well done, Lisa, and thank you for that. And I think you've covered all the bases here, and I think it's particularly appealing. And I'm sure Councillor Schumacher will agree with me, but the accessibility aspect of that as well. So I think you've really covered it all, and I think this is a great report and totally in favor. Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Chair Fitzgerald. This is great. My question has to do with, I know I've received phone calls before about people asking about events or what's happening, being cancellations and stuff like that. So would you be able to direct them right to this digital site? So if there is a cancellation for whatever reason, they be able to locate it right there?
Through you, Chair Fitzgerald. So there's two parts to that question. The leisure guide has always contained about 6 months or more of content from September until March, and then March until September, and we've had to plan in advance. So the actual printed guide would contain information, but if programs changed or canceled or instructors needed more flexibility, we didn't have the ability to update that guide. What we are suggesting is we do 3 months, so we'll come out every 3 months with a new digital guide. It will allow us, one, to plan for those 3 months. If changes do occur, we can quickly update that PDF, that link online. And we'll be coordinating as well in collaboration. There'll be social media and obviously content on our website. So I think that answers. But with respect to events, what we're talking about more so is the programming. Okay.
Councillor Stone.
So with the content you're creating, it's not really a lot of money at this point, but with the content you're creating, can that same content be used for business attraction? And I'm thinking about our new physician recruitment content that we're trying to get together for them.
Through you, Chair Fitzgerald. Absolutely. The content that we create online can be used in promotion, because essentially our community services are that. It's a great indication of what it's like to live here and the benefits of living here and all the enrichment that we offer the community. So absolutely, if people wanted to share the link for business attraction, by all means.
Fantastic.
Any further questions? I have one small question. I'm wondering if, do we feel that 3 months gives members of the community enough time to plan for their children, their spouse, and everything they need to plan for? Does that give them enough time to schedule their programming?
So to answer your question, the information about our programming will exist in perfect mind. So, our program coordinators work really hard at scheduling all that information. What the digital guide will do is offer fresh content and a fresh marketing tool for every 3 months. So if you wanted to go into perfect mind and look at programming in, say, December, it potentially could be there.
Okay, perfect, thank you. All right, seeing no further questions, I will call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
And I will move this over to Mayor Terziano to take over as chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Under new business, we have an art in the park discussion. Simone, are you going to lead that, or where am I? Okay. No, that's okay. Okay, I will lead that. Art in the Park discussion is about the potential for a piece of art in Kent Park. And we've had that discussion a few times around the table. Our staff were going to go out to community partners such as the BIA and the Chamber, and I'm sure others, to start getting input. And it was my thought that maybe Council wanted to give some kind of broad parameters to what they might be looking for before they start the process, so they sort of had something to go out with. And I know Deputy Mayor Alcock has been quite verbal in it, so I'm going to ask if you want to kick it off with some general ideas.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wish I had thought about this a little more, sorry. I have been verbal, but one of the things that I definitely am supportive of having some art installation in Kent Park that is really worthy. I know that there have been lots of criticisms around what we've created in Kent Park, and for a number of reasons. But I think what the park does lend itself to is this open space that what I have noticed since it's newly created in its new form is that actually people are using it, and people are sitting in the chairs, and people are leaning against the rocks and It is a place that eventually I think will be seen as a gathering spot. And I'm not suggesting that we do another recreation of Tom Thompson, but as we all know, Tom Thompson in front of in Civic Square is one of the most popular spots for people taking pictures. People love, you know, sitting beside him and doing all of that stuff. So I'm not saying we create another Tom Thompson sculpture, but something that is equally iconic. And but as we know, I'd be curious to know what process we went through in the creation of Tom Thompson in Civic Square. I can't remember. I know that probably, Your Worship, you have a fairly strong memory of as to what kind of process we went through. And one of the things that I think is really important, that if we were to agree that Kent Park lends itself to another installation, that we have to be sure as to what kind of process, and I think it's got to be a public process, that people feel they've had input as to what will inevitably go there, and including even the location of where in the park it should go. So I know I'm not helping as to the parameters. I personally think the parameters should be something that if the installation, if possible, it should be created by a local artist, whether that art, and the artist is loosely defined, right? You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be an artist that is strictly tied to what we traditionally call sculpture, but so someone that's local or a group that's local. I would prefer personally that we stay away from things that you can immediately see elsewhere. I know some people have said a giant Muskoka chair. Personally, not my cup of tea, because I think you can see that elsewhere, right? This has to be iconic. It has to represent who we are as a community, and I just those would be the parameters. Those would be a couple of criteria I think are important. So iconic, prepared and created by a local artist or group of artists, that we have a public process to get us there, and something that speaks to what Huntsville is about. So that's maybe all I've got. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Councillor Weed.
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. I agree with with much of what Deputy Mayor Alcock just said. I think that I'd like to take it one step further and open it up into the public in terms of almost like a contest. I think that we should invite artists from Muskoka to pitch an idea for probably something that's metal or indestructible that can go there, and maybe have the public decide, or have it open up on through our page, to have it some real public engagement and have a bit of a sort of playoff on who gets the final vote. I think it would be fun. I think it'd be really engaging, and I think we'd get something that in the end, everyone who participates, that's the majority would win the day, and I think it would be pretty fun and engaging event. So rather than trying to find someone to decide and hope that it goes over well, let's really make it a true public engagement process, and I think we'd end up with something really spectacular there.
Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree 100%. I think the public input is perfect. What I'd like to see maybe is go down a route of maybe something that goes with the seasons also, and is not cluttered with a lot of different art that's really to that event or that season, whether it be the winter time or summertime or springtime. So you could actually change it out for every season. So I think that's not great. We have a great opportunity here.
Anyone else? Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Yeah, I agree a lot with what's been said around the table. I agree. I mean, I don't know how transferable something would be Or, yeah, do we do something, a tie-in where we are, you know, painting canoes or whatever that they've done in something like Huntsville? But yeah, keeping in mind that, and I think the Ironman brings in a big chair anyway, so there is options for those kind of pictures. But there is a newer generation that comes out and they do blogging and they do, you know, those backdrop pictures that become sort of that selfie moment. So I think it's kind of where I want to see the engagement in the public is going through, you know, everybody and every aspect of what is that option that people would want to see.
Okay. And thanks to the clerk, she provided me with a report that apparently I wrote back in 2003 on Tom Thompson. So, and I do recall that Tom Thompson was the approved commissioning artist, Brenda Wayman Goulet, to create the life-size statue of Tom Thompson. And we set up a fund for the entire Civic Square, I think, and we were looking for donations. And if I recollect correctly, we did receive $100,000 worth of donations for the creation of that to pay for that statue. So, you know, maybe a public art process is a really good thing to do, and maybe we can even raise some funds towards it. So, Simone, I don't know whether that's helps much or not. And I know you also sent me a note suggesting that we maybe pass a resolution to get Trish Conley Knight to lead the process and start the public feedback. I'd end up with finding out costs for our 2023 budget. We can run something like that up. I'll just go to Councillor Fitzgerald before we get to the resolution, though.
Thank you, Worship. You sparked my interest when you said maybe we could raise some funds. It seems to me that maybe we should do several installations throughout the year in efforts to bolster the community financially in some way, shape, or form, whether it be our hospital or some other cause in the municipality. So similar to Councillor Armour's seasonal installment, some more along the lines of what we do at the Summit Center with the art, but to benefit the town.
Okay, we've got a resolution just about ready here. Oh, that's pretty good. Go ahead, put that back up for a second. You're not going to put that back up? So we have a draft, the first draft that says, is recommended that staff be directed to work with community partners to investigate art possibilities within Kent Park that could include an iconic installation representative of Huntsville, partnering with local artists, a contest for citizens, seasonal installations, fundraising opportunities, and further staff report back to General Committee with a selection of examples, suggestions, and costs for the 2023 budget. It sort of takes in everything that's been said so far, and it doesn't actually limit them to anything. And maybe let's just add in that the project be led by Trish, so that we have a staff person identified, somebody who doesn't have enough work to do yet. Does anybody want to modify that at all? Simone?
Thank you, Mayor Terciano. I'm suggesting that maybe we add in there that we do have a public art policy and it does outline a process, so we could follow that.
In accordance with the public art policy.
Thank you.
And we'll throw this resolution up, and can I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Wiebe and Councillor Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald. You share that? Okay. So we have a resolution moved by Councillor Weep, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. It is recommended that staff be directed to work with the community partners to investigate art possibilities within Kent Park that could include an iconic installation representative of Huntsville, partnering with local artists, a contest for citizens, seasonal installations, fundraising opportunities, and further that staff report back to General Committee with a selection of examples, suggestions, and costs for the 2023 budget process, and further that the project be led by Trish Conley Knight in accordance with the public art policy. Any final comments? All in favor? Final comment?
Are we sure we want to limit ourselves with our current art policy? I haven't reviewed it in a couple of days, so.
It's just a process.
Okay.
Yeah. All in favor? And that carries. One last piece of business, and this is the community art, the Killarney Garden in the park. This comes from a lot of conversations we've been having for a lot of years, and the fact that we've now identified a location for our public washroom, where the garden had often been referred to as the location for the new public washroom. So, and the fact that the garden, people are trying to make improvements and trying to access grant funding, and the difficulties of us not being committed to it remaining in that location, and that is their wish to remain there. We've been asked to put this resolution on the table, and it is moved by Councillor Alcock and seconded by Councillor Armour. Whereas in 2010, Council adopted Parks and Recreation Committee recommendation PRO 610, directing staff to enter into an agreement with PROMPT, which was Poverty Reduction of Muskoka Planning Team, to allow them to lease individual plots to members for their organization for the purpose of growing vegetables for personal use in Rivermill Park. And whereas the town records do indicate an agreement was never executed, and whereas the community garden has become an integral part of the landscape in Rivermill Park, and whereas discussion has taken place over the past 6 years to potentially relocate the garden to a larger site, and whereas it is the desire of the Killarney Community Garden Group to remain in Rivermill Park, and where it is also the desire of council to maintain the community garden in Rivermill Park. Now therefore, it is recommended that staff be directed to notify the Killarney Community Garden of council's intention to maintain the community garden in Rivermill Park beyond the 2022 growing season, and further that staff be directed to prepare a community garden policy and contract for council's consideration, and further that goal RDINF 3.8, move the existing community garden to a larger location, be removed from the 2019-2023 strategic plan. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, a couple of things I don't like about this. The staff be directed to, first of all, what I don't like about it, I should say, is the last further of that, and that the goal RDINF 3.8 be removed from the strategic plan. The reason being, number one, that the Klahani people have been requesting for larger space over the years, number one, and there's just no, as far as council, I think is concerned, or committee is concerned, probably not willing to grant them additional space there. There are other options, of course, for the community garden. The fact that it is limited in space does restrict the number of people that actually can access it, number two. And as far as the agreement is concerned, I guess I would be okay with that if in terms of the agreement that the appearance of the park overall be part of the agreement, because it has been an eyesore at times in the past, and it doesn't lend itself to the I guess the the ongoing appearance of River Mill Park in itself. So those are my two comments about it. I don't like the idea of removing that from the strategic plan, and if staff could somehow work into the agreement, the overall appearance of and the upkeep of the garden. Thank you.
Okay, so just, so the idea of removing it from the strategic plan is if we're granting them permission to stay, we need to take it out of the plan that we plan to move them. As far as their request for larger space, they have made it perfectly clear that they're willing to maintain the space they have because their desire is to remain in the location they're in with what they have. And as far as the overall look, that's one of the things they're trying to improve through new attractive fencing. And another commitment that we are making, at least through conversations with staff, is that we're going to do a better job of clearing around the fencing of all the overgrowth and everything to open the area up and make it more attractive too. So that might address both your concerns.
It does, in a sense, Your Worship, other than the fact that the overall size of it does restrict the number of potential users of the garden type of thing. So, thank you.
Councillor Stone was next.
Thank you. So I don't know if you fully answered the question, but council's intention to maintain the community garden in River. So is this simply town staff to clear a perimeter around that, or is it to do anything else with it?
No, this isn't the town maintaining the garden. It's just maintaining the couple feet around the outside of the fencing. Which if you look back to pictures that when they developed it in 2010, it was very clear around the outside of the garden. Deputy Mayor Alcock, and then Councillor Withey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to add, I think you actually provided the answer on a couple of questions. I'm really in favor of this motion, and to the point of removing it from the strategic plan. There was a bit of a discussion with one of the founders of the garden about, at some point we had talked about the possibility of having a larger garden over at Heritage Place, and while she recognized some of the benefits to that as far as a larger space, ideally they very much want to stay where they are because of its central proximity to everything else. The other about being closer to the high school, as she pointed out, you know, in the summer during growing season, there's really no one there from the high school to participate in the community garden. So while ideally it's a nice idea, it doesn't actually practically work. And going back to the issue of one of the reasons why they would very much like us to commit to this location is that they have actually applied for funding for certain grants, and they have a precarious status. They're not considered a not-for-profit. They don't have an agreement with the town, so their status is kind of precarious, and funders look at that. So if they had the commitment from the town to say, yes, you're going to stay there, then that will help with their funding applications, because they would very much like to improve the fencing and do a number of the other things that we've often talked about. So I think that this motion goes a long way to help them do the things that we would like them to do. And to me, this is the best spot. I totally agree with the principle as we've always stated in the past. So thanks.
Councillor Withey.
Thanks, Your Worship. I agree that this is a good motion. I think that the first box it ticks is the fact that the community garden group always wanted to remain in this location. So I think listening to them is important for us to do. I do know there were discussions about other locations and perhaps moving it. I don't think there's anything anywhere that says we can't have more than one community park, and I know there was discussion at one point, if we are fortunate enough to get the property that the existing Fairburn sits on and the closure of Mountview sewage treatment plant might be an option there as well. So I'm not concerned with the restrictive size. I think it's what they want, and I think this is an important move for us to make to help solidify this. Thank you.
Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, through you, your worship. And I mean, yeah, I sat on prompt a number of years ago, and that was kind of always the goal, was to create it where it was accessible and downtown for most. And what I've heard time and again is they don't necessarily want to make it larger, they just want to make it better in the existing location. So I do believe, in talking with Kim, some of the funding they do want to create is more accessibility within the existing location and raise beds and to make it a little better. And then, as Councillor Withey alluded to, it doesn't preclude us from having another community garden elsewhere, whether we do the Florence Street project and have a little community garden there, or the Mount View place. I think it just adds to our community.
Okay, the clerk has prepared some amendments to the original motion that I'm going to ask her to share, which I think might address most of the concerns raised, and we'll see if it does. This amendment would be moved by Councillor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Stone, and I won't read the whole thing again, but the amendments are: staff be directed to notify Killarney Community Garden of Council's intention to maintain the current location of the community garden and the perimeter in River Mill Park beyond the 2022 growing season. Staff be directed to prepare a community garden policy and contract for council's consideration to include the town's approval of the overall appearance and upkeep of the garden. And was there one more, Crystal? That's it. And that's the amendment. Councillor Withey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Crystal, if you could scroll up, there's a typo. Keep going up. So the second whereas, it's on our screen on the old one, it says was never executed. The N is missing.
Oh, yeah. Good catch.
Thanks.
I will ask Councillor Thompson and Councillor Stone, are you fine with that amendment now? Or?
I am good.
Okay. All in favor of the amendment? And that carries. And then all in favor of the main motion as amended? And that also carries. And that, council, brings us to the end of our day, unless under general business anybody has anything they just really need to say. See no hands. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Withey and seconded by Councillor Wiebe. It is recommended that we do now adjourn at 12:22 p.m. All in favor? That carries.